We can't bury our heads in the sand. Just as we celebrate those achievements, we need to be honest with ourselves. The country just doesn't trust us right now. We've just suffered our worst ever electoral defeat. We lost more seats and we won fewer votes than any government ever. It was a comprehensive defeat, and it needs a comprehensive rethink. So just as I will defend our achievements, I will be painfully honest about our failings. We failed to deliver the strong NHS, the strong economy, and yes, the strong border that we promised. Friends, we must never fail our people again. And the truth is this: if we are going to change this party, to restore the trust and the confidence of the people, if we're going to tackle together the immense challenges our country faces, we are going to have to build something new, a new Conservative Party. That is what I call for today. A new Conservative Party, nothing less than that, built on the rock of our proudest traditions and noblest values, but a new Conservative Party. And if I am your leader, that is what together we will build, a new Conservative Party. Now, you know that I loathe empty rhetoric, big words and little action. That is part of the reason why we are where we are. You know that I will take a stand. You saw me take a stand last year, and frankly, it is the only reason why I won my seat of Newark at the general election. Against all the polls and the pundits, the only seat that our party won in the whole of Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire. Because my constituents, to whom I owe so much, knew that I took a stand. For them, for the country, for the change we need. So, today, let me set out 5 changes that this new Conservative Party must make, 5 stands that this new Conservative Party will take. And let me begin with this one. We must take a stand to secure our borders. We must secure our borders. 120,000 people have entered our country on small boats on our watch. 99% of them are still here, costing us billions. Frankly, there is no future for this party unless we take a stand to answer this problem. And the way to do that, we all know, is to detain and swiftly deport everyone who comes into our country illegally. But we will never do that. We will never do that. It is impossible unless we leave the European Convention on Human Rights. And we free ourselves from Tony Blair's Human Rights Act. These institutions are creating an arsenal of laws by which illegal entrants frustrate their removal. We have to change that. You can't ignore the European Court. We're a common law nation. You can't reform the European Court. It requires unanimity. 46 countries from Iceland to Andorra to Hungary. It's a fantasy. The choice before us is leave or remain. I'm for leave. I'm for the country. I am for the country of Magna Carta, of the habeas corpus, of the Bill of Rights, defending our own freedoms and liberties. I am for finishing the job that we started with Brexit and restoring to our people and our Parliament its sovereignty. So under my leadership, the new Conservative Party will stand for a new Great Reform Act, one that leaves the ECHR, repeals Tony Blair's Human Rights Act, and writes a British Bill of Rights. That is how, my friends, that is the only way that we get the foreign terrorists, the criminals, off our streets and out of our country. That is the only way that together we will end illegal migration for good. And the age of mass migration, that must end too. It's not making us any richer. It's putting immense pressure on our housing, our hospitals, our roads. And if we're honest with ourselves, the sheer scale and the lack of integration is sapping at our culture and our national cohesion. If I am your leader, I will fight for the effective freeze in net migration our country needs. And this time, we will cast it in iron. We will do it with a vote in Parliament, so that each and every one of us can look the British public in the eye and say, we mean it, we're going to do it this time. And if we do that, we give our country the effective breathing space that we need. Will we be open to the best and the brightest? Yes, absolutely. Will we be open to the world and his wife and all their extended family? No, not anymore. And under my Conservative Party, never, ever again. Thank you. And secondly, we must take a stand on net zero. Since 2001, energy prices in our country have quadrupled. Factories have closed. Families have suffered. And this is all because we have become so reliant on expensive forms of energy, like offshore wind. Now, Ed Miliband wants to phase out gas over the next 5 years. Now, in 2015, we knew that putting Ed Miliband and power together was a very bad idea. How right we were. We have to oppose his plan. It's going to send energy prices sky high. But we also have to oppose the root of the problem, the serious issue. And that's not the principle of net zero, but the crazy interim binding targets put into law by Gordon Brown. It's the mad targets, the carbon budgets, that don't take any account of innovation that's driving the mad policies. So I say that with our new Conservative Party, we will stand for cutting emissions, but we will never do it, never, on the backs of working people and by further deindustrializing our great country. And we must also take a stand to get Britain building again. Our country needs more homes. We need more industry and infrastructure. So I have a hard message for all of us today. If we want to be the party of low tax, of growth, of business, as I do, and I know you do too, we also need to be the party of fixing the broken system that stops us building the homes, the factories, the data centres, the roads, the trams, the trains, the investment that Britain desperately needs. We love this country. We will protect its beautiful countryside. We will ensure that local people have their say. But our new Conservative Party will stand alongside the scientist in need of lab space. It will stand alongside the town in need of better roads. And yes, it will stand alongside the 20 and 30-somethings trapped in their childhood bedrooms, dreaming of a home of their own, dreaming of getting on in life, waiting for their lives to begin. That's what we will do as a party. We will build our party our party will stand for the most ambitious programme of urban densification and regeneration in our country's modern history. We will stand for getting Britain building again. And we will also take a stand for a small state that actually works, not a big state that fails. Look, the last election was as much a referendum on our health service as it was on our borders. We have 20% more money, more doctors, more nurses in the NHS today than we had 5 years ago, and yet our hospitals barely treat any more patients. Our courts, our prisons, our police, our universities, our welfare system, none of this is working as it should. Now, Labour isn't going to fix any of this. The unions won't let them. We know that. But the new Conservative Party can and should. We need to do for all our public services what we did for schools in the 2010s. Empower the good leaders, kick out the bad ones, be relentless in driving up standards and having zero tolerance for failure. That must be at the core of our mission as a party. Look, I am proud when I look around this hall today at the Conservative family, and I see the small business owners like my mum and dad. I see the entrepreneurs. I see the business leaders. But where are the teachers, the doctors, the nurses? Where are the prison officers and the police officers? We must stand with them as well. We must stand for them. Our new Conservative Party will stand for building a state that actually works and the public services that every Briton deserves. And finally, we must stand for our nation and our culture, for our identity and our way of life. Why is it that so much of the British establishment seems to put Britain last? I'm told that we only have enough munitions to last a few weeks in war. And yet our country is giving foreign aid to parts of the world richer than our own. So if I am your leader, I will stand for cutting our bloated foreign aid budget and for spending 3% of GDP on our defence. Finally doing what government is meant to do, the first duty of any government: keep the British people safe. And what of our culture? Well, how have we come to the point where a teacher from Batley remains in hiding because in a class on free speech, of all things, they showed a cartoon of Mohammed? How have we come to the point, on our watch, in which the NHS has facilitated thousands of children to have life-changing, life-altering surgery? How have we come to the point where the RAF, the Royal Air Force, has chosen pilots on the basis of race and gender? Well, I say, our new Conservative Party, we will be tolerant, but we will stand for never tolerating any of this ever again. We are the lucky inheritors of unparalleled national identities: British, Welsh, Scottish, Northern Irish, English. And our new Conservative Party will stand for carrying the torch for these identities and handing it on to our children and our grandchildren with pride, with passion, and with purpose. So, my friends, securing our borders by leaving the ECHR and a cap in Parliament to end the era of mass migration. Yes to net zero, but no to Ed Miliband's mad plans. Getting Britain building again. defending our nation and our culture, building a small state that actually works, not a big state that fails. 5 changes that our new Conservative Party will make. 5 stands that this new Conservative Party will take. As your leader, I will take a stand. The new Conservative Party will take a stand. Stand up for what is right. Stand up to those who are wrong. Stand alongside the hard-working men and women of this country who make Britain great and can make her greater still. Our party is at its best when we, friends, are the trade union of the working people of this country. From our seaside resorts to our rural outposts, from our industrial heartlands to our village greens, from world-class cities like this one to the towns that I grew up in and I'm proud to represent, Britain rises when all our people rise, all of them. So let's help them to rise again. 1974, 1974, 2024, a country facing huge challenges, a Labour government already out of answers, an opposition, a Conservative opposition, facing a big choice to go along with a failed consensus that is driving our country into the ground, or to have the courage, to summon the courage to change course, to unite around the practical solutions to the challenges that we face, and to change, really change. I want to lead that change. I want to be that change. So come with me, join me, work with me in this new Conservative Party, and together let's take a stand for the country that we love. Thank you. Thank you, Conference. Thank you.
Carver on Good Afternoon Britain. That was, of course, Robert Jenrick, the Tory leadership hopeful. We're going to turn to... I still have Stephen Pound and also Mike Parry in the studio with me, who will be giving their reaction to that speech. But let's turn to Birmingham, where Tom Harwood, my partner in crime, is. Tom, whilst we wait for Kemi Badenoch to take to the stage, what did you make of that performance? It seemed quite assured.
Absolutely fascinating. Robert Jenrick is trying to rebrand the Conservative Party here. We've heard for the first time repeatedly this phrase, the new Conservative Party, new Conservatives, the new Conservative Party. This is what Robert Jenrick has been saying for the first time here. What does that remind you of? Well, Tony Blair's new Labour Party. Tony Blair knew the Labour Party's brand was broken in the 1980s and early 1990s. In order to make that brand winnable, he had to change that brand, almost change the name of the party as well as the substance of the party, bring it back to the centre ground, to what Middle England could buy into. This is clearly what Robert Jenrick is trying to do here, a change to the name of the party to underline the changes he wants to make to the substance of the platform. Will it work? That is a big question, but it was an assured performance.
That's very interesting indeed, those parallels you draw with Tony Blair and New Labour. Just very quickly, he did set out 5 key stands, I believe he called them, sort of policies as such: securing our borders, leaving the ECHR, no ifs, no buts, an effective freeze on net migration, taking a stand against net zero, and I believe the last one was to build.
Yes, that's right. And people will remember when Robert Jenrick was Community Secretary, Housing Secretary, he proposed pretty sweeping planning reform that then got ditched by Boris Johnson. But I think it's those first 3 that really will make the mark today. Really strong stands on immigration, on illegal migration, and on the ECHR.
Yeah.
These are going to be some of the biggest points of discussion at this contest.
Very interesting indeed. Thank you very much. Tom Harwood will check in with you in a little bit. But a quick word from my panel here. Thank you very much for staying around. Stephen Pound, your view. 3 words, go on.
Pound shop Nigel Farage.
Right, OK, Mike Parry?
Very confident, very inspiring. I've seen something there that I didn't think I was going to see. And I love the fact that he focused on core Tory values, because the first two today didn't, and he has. Kemi Badenoch's got a big job on her hands now.
Right, OK, talking of Kemi Badenoch, she is up now.
It is time to tell the truth. The truth about our party, the truth about our politics, the truth about our future. For too long, politicians have been scared of the truth. For too long, politicians have hidden behind spin. For too long, politicians have told the public what they wanted to hear and then done their own thing. Well, I say enough. It's time to remember who we are, what we stand for, and what we want our country to be. 7 years ago, I stood on this stage, so proud to be a Conservative Member of Parliament. We had just lost our majority, but our party was still in government, and that was all that mattered. But I am no longer a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed backbencher. I am a veteran of 4 government departments and a former cabinet minister. I have seen the system from the inside. Ladies and gentlemen, the system is broken. It is not enough just to be in government, because you can be in government and not have power. Without a plan to fix the system, you end up just announcing policies, doing media, and waiting for something to happen. And then you run into trouble, as this Labour government are quickly finding out. For us, it led to a reckoning, a historic defeat, worse than 1997, a defeat that could extinguish the Conservative Party. We have to get this right. We have to renew, and then we can regain the trust of the British people. Otherwise, the left will get more time to ruin our country. And they've started quickly, haven't they? I actually thought it would take them longer to fall apart. But it is clear that this Labour government will leave a mess behind. We will not manage that decline. The Conservative Party does not manage decline. The Conservative Party reverses decline. Our country needs us. We must not let it down. For this to work, we need to go back to first principles. Why are we Conservatives? So much of what made me a Conservative came from my parents. My late father was full of wisdom. He used to say, "Never take your spouse for granted." He also said, "Never run for fun because you'll get bad knees." But he also taught me responsibility. He would say 80% of what happens to you is down to you. He was right. And as a GP, he taught me how to solve problems. He would say, if you get the diagnosis wrong, the treatment won't work. I miss my dad. He taught me the most important lesson of all. Never be afraid to do the right thing. No matter what people say about you, just do the right thing. My father taught me not to be afraid. I was born here, but I grew up in a place where fear was everywhere. You cannot understand it unless you've lived it. Triple checking that all the doors and windows are locked, waking up in the night at every sound, listening as you hear your neighbors scream as they are being burgled and beaten, and wondering if your home will be next. When you've experienced that kind of fear, you're not worried about being attacked on Twitter. You appreciate how rare and precious it is to live in a country with security, democracy, equality under the law, and above all else, freedom. Free speech, free enterprise, free markets, conservative freedoms, conservative principles. I am not a conservative because I studied politics at university. I'm an engineer. I am not a conservative because my family always voted conservative. I am a conservative because I have seen what happens when a country loses sight of those principles, and that must not happen here. But if conservative principles are so great, why aren't we in government anymore? The truth is, we lost faith and stopped acting like conservatives. We stopped being leaders and became managers. We spoke right and governed left, and when we went after Labour votes, we lost our own. There is no greater example than net zero. We set a target with no plan on how to meet it, just so politicians could say we were the first country to do so. Now we have a net zero strategy addicted to state subsidy, making energy more expensive and hurting our economy. I am not a climate change skeptic, but I am a net zero skeptic. I did not become an MP to deliver an agenda set by Ed Miliband. Promises must come with a plan. Plans must be based on principles. That is the conservative way. But in government, we did not always keep our promises. We promised to lower taxes. They went up. We promised to lower immigration. It went up. Why? Because the Treasury said high immigration was good for the economy, but we knew it was not good for our country. And we did not always defend our values. We did not defend capitalism. Capitalism does not mean corporatism. It does not mean monopolies. It means free markets and competition. We didn't always protect those principles. Like Labour, we raised taxes on business, corporation tax, capital gains tax, we taxed dividends, and we regulated like Labour. So instead of encouraging people to start and grow a business, it got harder and harder. Economics is not just some technical exercise. It's about people, their hopes and their aspirations. It's how we help the poorest in society. In the 80s, our party gave this country a golden age of wealth creation. Where is that now? Look at the hypocrisy of Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves, who target savers and wealth creators while taking money from a millionaire. The Conservatives have to be the party of wealth creation. Wealth is not a dirty word. It supports jobs and families. It pays for our schools and our health service. We should defend it and encourage it. We need to stop being afraid of defending our beliefs. Those beliefs are needed now more than ever. They are needed now more than ever because a new political force has risen. Something I have been fighting all my political career: identity politics. Like the 1970s, we face a battle of ideas against the left and its desire for ever greater social and economic control. It is socialism returned, socialism in a suit. The British public knows that socialism doesn't work. They know. But if you give it a new label, you can sneak it in. You can promote class warfare under the banner of equality. You can take freedom and choice away from families by telling them that Ofsted inspection reports are unfair. If you call communism environmentalism, you can close down businesses, block the roads, and stop people going to work. This new politics has made us afraid to defend the people who need us, like young conservatives. They tell me they are afraid to share their politics with other students because they'll be attacked, that they are marked down by lecturers because of their beliefs. We have let young conservatives down. We need to defend them, champion them, and give them a party they can be proud of. But other people need us too, like women. For too long, government stayed silent as women were sacked for saying that a man cannot be a woman. I fought for them while Labour called them bigots. And it wasn't until the SNP put a sex offender in a women's prison that they understood the fight I was leading. We won that battle. Nicola Sturgeon has gone, and Labour now accepts our arguments. We are conservatives, elected to conserve what is great about our country. Thank you. We cannot sit by as the left denigrate our history and pull down our monuments. We must not be afraid, as we were in Batley. We must not be afraid to get involved, where a teacher was driven into hiding by Islamist thugs. Or when the very worst crimes were committed, when young girls were groomed and raped for years in Rotherham and Rochdale, and nothing happened. Nothing happened because those in charge were scared of being called racists. And then the system hid behind the Human Rights Act and failed to deport the child abusers and allowed them to walk the streets where their victims live. Well, enough. I am not afraid. This stealthy poisoning of our society needs to stop. And let's face it, the Liberal Democrats are not going to defend our country. Unlike the left, we know right from wrong. But we allowed ourselves to be bound by aggressive identity politics, by a treasury whose rules were written by Gordon Brown, and a legal system re-engineered by Tony Blair. You may think Blair and Brown were defeated in 2010, but the truth is the left never left. It's time to make a change. Ministers need to be able to make decisions that aren't endlessly challenged in the courts. If people don't like those decisions, there are elections. If the law says the government can't deport a foreign child abuser, then the law is an ass. And it means it's time for politicians to change it. And when the government relies on economic modelling, which doesn't grasp the realities of immigration, we know it's time to make a change. So here is what we are going to do. We are going to rewrite the rules of the game. If I become leader, we will immediately begin a once-in-a-generation undertaking, the sort of project not attempted since the days of Keith Joseph in the 1970s. A comprehensive plan to reprogram the British state, to reboot the British economy. A new blueprint for the great machine of our country, one that goes far beyond the relationship with the EU or the ECHR, a plan that considers every aspect of what the state does and why it does it. A plan built on the principles and priorities of our nation. A plan that looks at our international agreements, at the Human Rights Act, the Equality Act, at judicial review and judicial activism, at the Treasury and the Bank of England, at devolutions and quangos, at the civil service and the health service, at how we use power to give power to the British people. We will rewire, reboot, and reprogram. Nothing is more exciting to me. I am an engineer, and engineers do not hide from the truth. This work cannot be the work of just one woman. It has to be the work of a huge team, a team that goes way beyond Westminster. Our party is not a club or a clique. We're not just the ERG, the TRG, or One Nation. We are one Conservative party. We are a movement, a conservative movement. And I will always defend that cause. Some people say I like a fight. I can't imagine where they got that idea. But it's not true. I do not like to fight, but I'm not afraid to fight. I don't fight for the sake of fighting, but I do fight for you. Every day of the last Parliament, I fought for Conservative values. I fought for them even when I was told it wasn't in my interest. I fought for women's rights to safe spaces and children's rights to grow up in their own time. I fought against those who seek to divide our country based on race. I fought for the future of my 3 children and for your children. I will always fight against left-wing nonsense. I'm sad to be in opposition, but there's a part of me that's excited, because opposition is an opportunity to make Angie uncomfortable, to make Rachel wriggle, and make Starmer sweat. We are going to have fun. They thought that all they had to do was get us out. But they don't have a plan. They are not up to the job. They will let our country down, and we must be ready to replace them. My campaign is not about me. It's about all of us. It's called Renewal 2030 because we have to renew. And 2030 is likely the first full year we could have in government. We have it in our power to make the 2030s a golden decade, a time of renewal and growth. Not just growth in GDP or GDP per capita, but growth that most people can feel. Growth in our party and our country, an age that will leave a meaningful legacy for the British people for decades to come. A renewal based on personal responsibility, family, sovereignty, and capitalism. As Trade Secretary, I saw it all over the world. Capitalism, trade, and enterprise reduce poverty. Socialism creates poverty. Government prides itself on growing the economy. But government does not create growth. Business creates growth. Government needs to get out of the way. Any government that forgets that will start to think it knows better than business. It will allow Ed Miliband to build things like a great British energy company. Well, I've had a look at it. It doesn't produce energy, it's not a company, and there's nothing great about it. Government needs to be the servant of the market, not its master. It needs to protect fair play and proper competition. But the wealth of the country comes from the people who work in it, not the people who live off it. It comes from the businesses built by the brilliance of those who put in the time and take the risks. We will help them to shoot for the stars. We will help a new generation to build families and homes, to build careers and businesses, acquire capital, property, investments, and security. We will take the shackles off the economy so that it can fly and take the country with it. After we have picked and unpicked the damage done by this Labour government, my vision for beyond 2030 is this: for Britain to be a country where people can find a shared identity, 4 nations, but one united kingdom. A country where being a British citizen means more than just having a British passport. A country where people can be committed to each other, irrespective of their religion or what they look like. A Britain that is friends with its neighbours, but will always proudly protect its national interests. A Britain at ease with itself, a Britain that believes in itself. And that sort of Britain can only come about because of renewed conservative principles. And the time to start that renewal is right now.
Well, there we go, the final of the 4 leadership contestants. That was Kemi Badenoch giving her speech, a standing ovation there for her. She kept it relatively short and sweet compared to some of the other candidates. We're going to go to Tom Harwood, who's in Birmingham for us. Tom, what did you make of that speech? Light on detail, but some strong themes.
Light on detail, but an assured performance. I think Kemi Badenoch's team will be happy with how she came across there. The real question is, how does it compare to all the other speeches? I have to say, listening to all 4 of them, the one that most surprised me was that of James Cleverly. He perhaps had more to prove and had the audience in the palm of his hand. Perhaps Tom Tugendhat underperformed a little bit because of his sky-high expectation. He had a very very, very good interview with Christopher Hope the other day, and so perhaps the idea of him making a no notes and groundbreaking speech, the expectations were set very high. But I think Kemi Badenoch will be happy with the performance that she had there in front of the crowd. The standing ovation, clearly a very meaningful response, but was there enough there in terms of detail? That's still an open question.
Yes, I mean, it's difficult. They'll be speaking not only to members and their colleagues, but also to the country. And the big challenge is to restore trust in the party. And they all seem to acknowledge that the Conservatives have let people down, to some extent at least.
Yes, and one former Conservative Member of Parliament texted me during that speech saying that Kemi was right to point to the failures of the last government, particularly on tax and regulation, but also noted that she was business secretary under the former government. In fact, this is the difficulty of all of these candidates. They have all been ministers, either at cabinet or attending cabinet level under the last government, and to some extent, the record of the last government is also on their shoulders. How do they then make that pivot? One more thing that I felt was particularly interesting about Kemi's speech, we finally learnt what Renewal 2030 means. That's the name of her campaign, rather than the other campaigns which are based on the names of their candidates. She's named her campaign Renewal 2030, and she said in her speech, 2030 will be, if the Conservatives win the next election, which could either be in 2028 or 2029, the first full year of government of the next government. So we've learned what 2030 means, because it's not the next year of the next election.
That's not awfully obvious, Tom, but thank you very much indeed for clarifying that for us again, Tom. We'll leave it there. Tom Harwood, thank you very much indeed. We're going to take a very short break, and then I'm going to reintroduce my wonderful panel. I'll introduce them now, Mike Parry and Stephen Pound. They'll be with us. Also, please do get your views in. Did any of those speeches do it for you? Let me know. I'll read out some of our views very shortly, and please stay with us.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. Slow going for the northbound A1M just up to Bradbury Junction 60. It follows an earlier collision. Both sides of the M65 are currently closed. Accrington Junction 8 to Burnley at 10. Long delays for investigation work. Eastbound M4 just after Slough West at Junction 7. 2 lanes coned off there, and queues at the scene of an accident. Now, the earlier bump clockwise on the M25 just after Potters Bar 24 has cleared. All the lanes open, but it causes in the roadworks, heavy back to South Mims 23. Also clockwise, Dartford 1B to Darrenth at 2, blocked traffic at the stand. A motorbike involved in a collision, queuing back to the QE2 bridge. Anti-clock just after Waltham Abbey 26, 2 lanes coned off in the roadworks. There's a broken down lorry. There's heavy back to the M11 at 27.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, weekdays from 9 p.m.
Richard, you know, the King will probably fly there, I would imagine, with the Queen. You can guarantee they'll have to make a point about offsetting their carbon just to keep that lot happy. They won't use the walkabout term because they'll have to keep the Aboriginal community happy over there. Obviously, they'll be fine that the Queen's face has now been taken off banknotes over there, replaced, I believe, by a member of the Aboriginal community, naturally. You know, you've got all of these tick boxes that the King and the royal family have to do, instead of just maybe, I don't know, leading, being there, being present. Why do they keep bowing down to this stuff?
Well, firstly, as I say, I mean, if you look at the Commonwealth, there are 56 countries. Now, I think that's an enormously important institution, and we benefit in all sorts of ways, as do the other countries who are members of it. Now, if you don't take account, with times changing, by the way, of course, as they did during Queen Elizabeth's reign, if you don't take account of various sensitivities, especially certain pressure groups, I'm not suggesting that we write off our history as being something that's dreadful. There are ups and downs and pluses and minuses, we all know that. But the point is to be sensitive to other cultures, and that is absolutely pivotal.
What we're seeing in the UK, a lot of these same issues do crop up in Australia, especially with freedom of speech and saying the wrong thing, getting cancelled. I've met with so many people who have personally, like, they've been deplatformed, lost their jobs just for having an opinion, just for potentially saying the wrong thing, and then losing their livelihood as a result. So with Australia, I think particularly this is the trend that we saw from 2020 with the lockdowns, especially in Melbourne, some of the harshest lockdown restrictions in the world. Now, Australia is known as being a country of freedom and liberty. So then I think for many Australians, it was a huge turning point, a big wake-up call.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Good Afternoon Britain. It is now 12:49, and there were a few themes that stuck out in all of the speeches, really. Renewal, growth, cutting migration, they all played centre stage. All four Tory leader contenders have now set out their stall to become the leader of the opposition. And watching all of their speeches was Mike Parry and Stephen Pound. Thank you very much indeed for sitting through all of that. They were longer than we expected. We weren't expecting them to be so long, but you can understand why they decide to go on for these things. It's their one chance, isn't it? Sure. Really. Lots of people have been getting in touch, so I'm quite impressed by Kemi, actually. Mike, what do you think?
Well, I started to despair a bit halfway through, and I thought she's not really hitting, you know, the central points properly. I wonder whether she had to revise what she was saying and the order in which she said it, because Jenrick's speech, in my view, is the most impressive one, and she had to think, I've got to reshuffle this a bit. However, in the second half, I thought she got stronger. I thought she came out with the policy. She looked very assured. I do think she's the best performer of the four. Her diction is brilliant, you know what I mean? So she's a great communicator, very clear-minded. I was very impressed, and now I'm split between Jenrick and Kemi Badenoch.
Well, this is what they're up against, isn't it, Stephen? Because Zarian here says, a fine speech, Mr. Jenrick, but we don't believe you. We never will ever again. Winning back that trust from people who abandoned the Conservatives at the last election, difficult.
Well, that's not necessarily an anti-Jenrick statement. That's a sort of anti-Conservative statement.
Yeah, oh, yes, he's probably written it about all of them.
Oh, yeah, I think. But I honestly think that Kemi Badenoch will be a very effective minister in Robert Jenrick's first cabinet. Because watching that, I think Tom Tugendhat desperately underperformed, and I think it was and I think James Cleverly, they had good points. He was ponderous, and there was a certain absence of detailed policy there. Jenrick certainly has tacked massively to the right. When I was in the House with him, I don't remember him ever being quite so robust and on the right wing.
Well, he says that it was his time in the Home Office that made him that way, that his eyes were open. Some say he was radicalised by what he saw in the Home Office. He says he just had his eyes open. I mean, Brian says, the best line of the day is from Stephen Pound in the studio, Jenrick is a pound shop, Nigel Farage. So there you go. That's certainly what they're saying. But Mike, so who do you expect to come out on top from those speeches? How much do these matter?
Well, significantly at the end, Kemi Badenoch got a standing ovation. Now, we all know that the membership, she is still favourite with the membership. Whether enough has been done today by Jenrick to sway that, and just that comment you've got there, Stephen said that's come from somebody who's anti-Conservative, but there is this amazing reformation in thought that Jenrick suddenly inherited. Could it be because he was at the Home Office, he saw the blob close up for the very first time and realised how much of this country is run by faceless civil servants? Is he determined to try and change that around? Again, I think Jenrick and Badenoch, it's between those two for me, and I do think she'd be a great minister to Jenrick if she's not leader, but whether she would be able to do that in light of her ambitions, I don't know.
But, I mean, the Home Office does terrible things to a person. When I was with Hazel Blears, and I was her PPS, and certainly, you know, she used to come out shaking. But she said to me one day, she said, if you think the Home Office is bad, look at the Treasury. If you think the Treasury bad, look at the Cabinet Office. If you think the Cabinet Office is bad, look at the senior civil servants. So the blob, as you know, in Michael Gove's speech, is actually rolls down the whole of Whitehall. And remember, it was, you know, and years ago, we said that the Home Office is not fit for purpose.
I mean, just Mike, very quickly, because we're running out of time. This talk about the market, how the government shouldn't be should be the servant to the market and not the master, etc. Does that go down well with the general public?
Well, I think so, because to me it means freedom. The markets dictate economic policy, not politicians, in my view. So that means that it's the freedom of the democratic constitution of business in this country and not putting red tape on business. So I like that very much.
Yeah, it's tricky, though, because, of course, she's been making headlines about maternity pay, now also minimum wage.
But people are talking about it.
People are talking about it.
Andrea Leadsom, when she stood against...
seconds.
Yeah, Andrea Leadsom stood against Theresa May. She lost it by saying, you should vote for me because I've had children. I think that may be the Andrea Leadsom moment.
Right, OK, thank you very much indeed, Mike Parry and Stephen Pound. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. We are, of course, going to be turning our attention to the Middle East as well with Mark White, our Home and Security Editor.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning and welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Well, across the south there is plenty of cloud today with some showers possible at times, but in the north we do have plenty of fine and dry weather. And the reason for this is that high pressure is generally dominating the weather in the north, but we still have an area of low pressure down to the southeast, which is bringing us that cloud and those showers, perhaps some longer spells of rain and drizzle at times too. But across Northern Ireland, Scotland, northern parts of England, plenty of fine and dry weather, perhaps just a bit more cloud at times in the afternoon, but still plenty of bright and sunny spells in between. Temperatures generally are around about average, but it is going to be feeling colder under that cloud. But in those sheltered spots, particularly western parts of Scotland, it should feel rather pleasant where you catch the sunshine. Now, heading into the evening, that cloud is going to stick around across southern parts for a time, still with some spots of rain and drizzle and some showers moving into eastern coasts, not really dying away until the overnight period. But across Northern Ireland, Scotland, once again, northern parts of England, plenty of late evening sunshine before it goes down. However, as the sun does start to go down, it is going to be feeling quite cold overnight, likely to see some frost, particularly in northern parts of the country, and in rural spots as well, likely to see some mist and fog overnight too, which might just be a little bit slow to clear by the time we reach the morning. That cloud across the south will eventually ease away in those showers too, but you might still just catch the odd one or two, particularly across parts of East Anglia. But as I say, generally a cold night overall, particularly in the north, where we're likely to see that frost by the time you wake up in the morning. Now, generally, though, Thursday is the better day. We've got high pressure building, which means lots of fine and dry weather across the country. Still a slight breeze around coastal areas, which might just add on to the wind chill there, and still just the possibility of the odd shower across East Anglia. But otherwise, another fine, dry day for many, just perhaps a bit more cloud in the west later.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
There's still plenty.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
True crime is everywhere.
Yeah, next weekend, CrimeCon UK takes place in London. And joining us now to tell us more about that event and the true crime phenomena is former detective Stephen. How do you pronounce your surname? Keogh. Sorry, Stephen.
That's all right.
I should have checked you before.
No worries.
And Nancy, and again, Nancy, what's your surname?
Bourne.
Thank you. I'm showing my ignorance there, but thank you both for joining us. So, Stephen, you're a former top cop. Hope you don't mind me describing you as that. At CrimeCon and other events like that, do you get into sort of the semantics of the investigations and, you know, how... For example, how I was watching something the other night where somebody was unfortunately murdered, but you saw the crime scene investigators trying to work out from which side the person was attacked from. Did the knife come from the left-hand side or the right-hand side? Is it all that kind of stuff?
So for me, everything I've done since I've left the police is about sharing that knowledge of investigations, because if you watch TV, they get it wrong a lot. So what we try and do, I'm not the only police officer there, there's experts, have forensic scientists, psychologists, all from that investigative world, just trying to get across, well, actually, this is how it's really done. This is what we do, not what you're going to see on telly. And I think that's really important. So for me personally, coming along to CrimeCon, I just look at the list of people that are there, honestly, and I'm proud to be associated with them. There are some fascinating people there, People have really fought for justice for their children. People are campaigning for victims, for survivors. So it's an event that when you look at the name, you might think, oh, they're just going to sit there talking about serial killers and what they got up to. Couldn't be further from the truth. It's really about what goes on, how it impacts the victims, how the investigations are carried out. It's educational as much as anything.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Wednesday, the 2nd of October. I'm Emily Carver. Well, we've now heard from the 4 Conservative leadership contenders, James Cleverly, Kemi Badenoch, Tom Tugendhat and Robert Jenrick, who will now come out on top. And Israel invades. Israeli troops have launched a ground invasion into southern Lebanon in what the Israeli military calls a limited, localised and targeted ground operation. This as we will bring you the very latest from the region. Right, OK, and we're going to be bringing you lots more, including updates on the acid attack from yesterday. And please do get in touch throughout the show. Post your comments visiting gbnews.com/your-say. But let's get the news headlines with Tatiana.
Good afternoon. The top stories from the GB newsroom, and all 4 Tory leadership candidates have given their speeches on the final day of the party conference in Birmingham. Shadow Security Minister Tom Tugendhat saying the Tories have led the fight for freedom. The Conservative candidate said he's had enough of the lack of principle and clarity. Mr Tugendhat said the general election was bruising and that the Tories need to restore trust as he set out his pitch to be the party's next leader.
Leadership is not about empty promises. It's not about cheap rhetoric or government by management consultancy. It's not about managing decline, and it's not about talking our country down. Leadership is about making choices that serve our country and our people best. I promise you that as your leader, I will serve our country. I will lead with conviction. I will act decisively. My mission is the prosperity and happiness of the British people. Together, we can win.
James Cleverly opened his speech at the Conservative Party conference with an apology to members, adding that the parliamentary wing of the party had let them down.
Sorry on behalf of the Conservative Parliamentary Party who let you down. And we have to be better, much better. And under my leadership, we will be. The British people are never wrong. The British people told us to go and sort ourselves out. Let's not make them tell us again.
Robert Jenrick said the Tories need to create a new Conservative Party that's built on the rock of our proudest traditions and noblest values, he said. Mr Jenrick also said we must stand for our nation, our culture, our identity.
Why is it that so much of the British establishment seems to put Britain last? I'm told that we only have enough munitions to last a few weeks in war. And yet our country is giving foreign aid to parts of the world richer than our own. So if I am your leader, I will stand for cutting our bloated foreign aid budget and for spending 3% of GDP on our defence.
And Kemi Badenoch has vowed to make the Chancellor wriggle and the Prime Minister sweat. She rounded up the speeches today, adding young Conservatives had been let down by the party.
A new political force has risen, something I have been fighting all my political career. Identity politics. Like the 1970s, we face a battle of ideas against the left and its desire for ever greater social and economic control. It is socialism returned, socialism in a suit.
In other news, Israel will reportedly launch a significant retaliation to Iran's missile attack within days that could target oil production facilities. That's according to the US-based news site Axios. Last night, the Israeli Prime Minister said Iran had made a big mistake with its attack and will pay for it. Both the UK and the US have confirmed they've supported Israel in shooting down over 180 Iranian missiles headed for the country. Defence Secretary John Healey said forces played their part to prevent further escalation in the region. Mr Healey is visiting Cyprus to meet troops who are preparing for the possibility of evacuating British citizens from Lebanon. Now, the attack came in retaliation to Israel's air and ground operation in Lebanon against Iranian-backed terror group Hezbollah and the assassination of their leader on Friday. In a televised address last night, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, publicly supported Israel's right to self-defence.
Utterly condemn this attempt by the Iranian regime to harm innocent Israelis. It cannot be tolerated. We stand with Israel and we recognise her right to self-defence.
The Prime Minister travels to Brussels today in a bid to improve relations with the EU and bolster the security, the safety and prosperity of the British people. Sir Keir Starmer will visit for talks with European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen about resetting Britain's relationship with the European Union. He aims to push for a better trading relationship and greater cooperation on defence and security measures. But he's also under pressure to agree to Brussels' call for a deal on youth mobility to allow young EU citizens greater freedom to come to the UK to study and work. Right, we're going to take you to the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, who is in Brussels giving talks and meeting with the EU President Ursula von der Leyen.
Our alignment on global affairs provides a good foundation for our bilateral relations. And we have a set of solid agreements in place. We should explore the scope for more cooperation while we focus on the full and faithful implementation of the withdrawal agreement, the Windsor Framework and the TCA. So, in short, we have a lot to discuss today, and I'm very much looking forward to working with you and to continue to strengthen our relation.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Ursula. It's really fantastic to see you again so soon after our meeting in the UN in New York. And it's a real pleasure to be here today for these sets of meetings that we have this afternoon. I firmly believe that the British public wants a return to pragmatic, sensible leadership when it comes to dealing with our closest neighbours, to make Brexit work and to deliver in their interests, to find ways to boost economic growth, strengthen our security and tackle shared challenges like irregular migration and climate change. We will, as you've already indicated, discuss other wider issues like the crisis in the Middle East. And can I join you in condemning the attack by Iran just recently? We stand with Israel, recognising her full right to security and to self-defence. We do need to pull back from the brink and to encourage all parties to find a way to de-escalate and for a political solution to the very many fronts of the crisis in the Middle East. And of course, foremost in our minds are the hostages still held after such a very, very long time. They should be released immediately and unconditionally. In dangerous times, we also look at the war in Ukraine and stand with Ukraine in the face of Russian aggression. As we said at the United Nations last week, Russia's actions are completely outside and contrary to the Charter of the UN, which we all uphold. And in the ongoing war in Ukraine, we work ever more closely with our allies. In dangerous times, we have a duty to work together to preserve stability and security. So I'm looking forward to a productive set of discussions today with Ursula, of course, and later with the President of the European Council and the President of the European Parliament. We are determined to put this relationship back on a stable, positive footing that I think we all want to see. Thank you, Ursula.
Thank you very much. So, here, can I take you along?
Of course.
Right, OK, that was the Prime Minister in Brussels with Ursula von der Leyen there, delivering a speech. We will be turning to Tom Harwood, who is in Birmingham to react off the back. He is with Marc Francois, a member of the ERG. Tom, thank you very much indeed. It would be fantastic to get some reaction to what we just heard.
Yes, I'm here with Marc Francois, the chairman of the European Research Group, Conservative MP, of course. Marc, Keir Starmer is in Brussels today, trying to perform a reset with the European Union. What do you make of it?
I'm very wary of this. I've always said that Starmer remains a Remainer. I sat in Parliament week after week for over 2 years and watched Starmer conspire with people all around the House to try and keep us in the EU at almost any cost. So he now goes over there to talk about a reset. I'm worried that that might go beyond the mandate that the British people gave us to leave the European Union in 2016. Remember, Starmer was the one who called night after night for a second referendum. So I think we're right to be a bit cautious about this.
Are you saying you don't believe the Prime Minister when he says that he believes that we should be out of the single market, out of the customs union, but have a closer relationship with Europe outside of its institutions?
One of the things I learnt from bitter experience is on anything to do with the European Union, you always have to read the small print, be it the Lisbon Treaty or the Trading Cooperation Agreement or the Withdrawal Agreement or whatever. So if he's talking about a reset, I want to see what that says in writing and what legally it actually means. So we haven't seen that yet, but I think we should remain cautious.
What do you think the optics are of Keir Starmer being in Brussels today, having a very friendly press conference with Ursula von der Leyen, as we've just seen? How do you think that is going to play?
Well, it's not unusual for a British Prime Minister to go to Brussels. It's not unusual for them to have high-level meetings. Nothing on one level unusual about that. The reason for my caution is based on what I saw with my own eyes in the House of Commons week after week for a couple of years. Here's a man who desperately wanted to have a second referendum because he didn't like the result of the first one. And I'm worried that he is the person who's now talking about a reset with the European Union.
Now, Marc, I must say we've got some cheers in the hall here. People might be able to hear it from our migrophones. This is a level of electricity here at this conference. Whenever a candidate appears, orchestrated or otherwise, there are big rounds of applause and whoops. What did you make of the 4 speeches that we heard earlier today? Of course, you're supporting Robert Jenrick.
Yes. Well, look, I mean, you made the point. There's a lot of energy here. You know, going around the bars and bazaars, it didn't feel like a party that had just been clobbered in the general election. I mean, we accept the result, but actually the mood was quite upbeat. Today, I was in the hall for all 4 speeches. We had 4 very high-quality speeches. So that's reassuring. And whoever we pick, we've got 4 good candidates. The job of the MPs like myself is to whittle that down to a final 2. And it's not going to be an easy choice. I thought Robert did very well. He had 5 particular points. You know, he was the man with the plan, if you like, and I thought that came across very well. And I thought he got a very positive reaction in the hall. But to be fair, you know, the others performed well as well. But I thought maybe Rob pipped it.
Robert, clearly strong performance. What the markets are saying, the betting markets, have very much shortened the odds on James Cleverly. I've been speaking to his campaign just before coming on air. They're pointing me to betting exchanges where people have put a lot of money on James Cleverly after his speech. Clearly, a very strong performance and a standing ovation.
Well, they all got standing ovations of varying degrees. After the events of the last few months, any politician's got to be a bit wary about talking about political betting. Right? You know, probably just best to be a little bit cautious on that. But no, I mean, James gave a good performance. One thing I thought was interesting, all 4 candidates invoke the spirit of Margaret Thatcher. Yeah, as someone who's always been a great fan of the Iron Lady, I just thought it was interesting that all of them wanted to draw on her heritage. No, James gave a good performance. They all did. I hope and believe Robert will be in the final, not taking anything for granted, but he's led the MP ballot in 2 rounds. I think he'll probably get into the final, and the question will be who's he going to be up against.
Yes, and that's the big question. I can see a plausible path to all of them. I think we've just been hearing cheers for Tom Tugendhat during this conversation. He has apparently 60 members of staff with him at this conference. The operations are huge, the free gifts are huge. Robert Jenrick's been making the joke all conference that there are so many free gifts being given out by all of the different candidates. It's a wonder the Prime Minister hasn't turned up.
Yes, if you were short of a pen when you turned up, you're not short of a pen now.
No, but here's the question. Does Robert Jenrick get through to the final, and against whom? At the start of this contest, it seemed like Kemi Badenoch was a shoo-in. Now it's perhaps more plausible that it's going to be a cleverly Jenrick race.
Well, it's certainly, you're quite right. A few months ago, many of your colleagues in the media, not saying it was you, Tom, but many did, they were writing up that it was a shoo-in for Kemi. I don't think, no disrespect to her, but I don't think anyone is writing that now. I think that the buzz among the media is now genuinely a very competitive contest, and let's just see where we end up. We haven't got long to wait, but I think if I'm honest, I thought my man did pretty well today.
And you'll be voting on Tuesday.
Absolutely, yeah, I wouldn't want to miss that.
There we go. Tuesday and Wednesday are the days of the next rounds of voting to narrow these 4 candidates down to 2. Back to you, Emily.
Thank you very much indeed, and to Mark Francois as well. Very interesting stuff to get his take also on Keir Starmer's trip to Brussels. He, of course, wants to kickstart negotiations on a new post-Brexit deal. But what exactly does that mean, and what will the European Union demand in return? Let's speak now to GB News political correspondent Olivia Rutley. Thank you, Tom. Olivia, thank you very much. You're in Brussels. That question to you, really, that we know that the Prime Minister wants to kickstart these negotiations for a new post-Brexit deal, get closer to the European Union in a way. But what are the European Union likely to demand in return?
Well, I think that's a very good question. Ursula von der Leyen is already lowering expectations. She said that this is just the very beginning of a conversation. The EU is at the moment saying that the ball is in the UK's court. And what exactly could any deal entail? Well, there is still talk about a youth mobility scheme, i.e. something like the Erasmus scheme, where young people could come to and from the EU to the UK to live, work or study. Now, of course, that would go down very, very badly with Brexiteers, and there are actually plenty of people within the Labour Party, including the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper, who worry about the effect that would have on overall migration figures. There is also a worry that the EU, there is this ongoing argument about fishing and energy. These 2 issues are sort of intrinsically linked under the terms of the withdrawal deal, and it could be that Britain would have to give the EU access to British fishing waters in order to get some sort of energy deal. Now, of course, that would really, really anger and upset British fishermen, many of whom voted for Brexit. So Starmer is going to have to, it looks as though if he is going to get anywhere with this reset of relations, he will have to give some ground. And that is ground that he doesn't really want to give. And he knows that the country doesn't really want him to give either. At the moment, it's all smiles, it's all handshakes, it's all warm words. EU diplomats saying that they would like to see Britain and the EU reset their relationship. But even if this, the current EU Commission feels more warmly to Keir Starmer than they did towards the previous Conservative government, it doesn't really change the harsh facts.
Yes, it does appear as though there's a little bit of a charm offensive going on. We have seen some cosy pictures of Ursula von der Leyen with Keir Starmer. So 2 issues here, potentially a youth mobility scheme. That's what the EU would like to see. Also, access to British waters, as you say, very controversial. That was one of the reasons why so many people voted for Brexit, at least one of them. But also talk of a new migrant returns deal, whereby the United Kingdom would have to accept potentially thousands of migrants from the European Union in order for then the European Union to take back some of the small boat migrants. Is that right?
Well, that is something that has been discussed. Keir Starmer has so far denied that that's something which he would seriously consider. Of course, in that situation, you could end up in a place where the UK is actually accepting far more migrants as a quota of EU migrants than it would be able to send back. So it doesn't seem to be a particularly favourable deal for Brits. And that's the problem that Britain keeps coming up against when it tries to reset these relationships with the EU. These warm words are all very well, but when it comes to it, the EU is a very, very tough negotiating partner, as David Cameron learnt to his cost back in 2013. And unless we take a quota of migrants, or else open our borders to a youth mobility scheme, or else open our waters to EU fishermen, all of which were hugely controversial issues over the Brexit referendum, and all of which, as you say, Emily, are reasons why people voted Brexit in the first place, then it doesn't really look as though anything tangible is going to happen. But let's see how the next day plays out. Keir Starmer has a very, very busy day of meetings in Brussels today, and at least the warm words might be a bit of a step forward.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Olivia Rutley, our political correspondent there in Brussels, where Keir Starmer is meeting with European officials, including, of course, Ursula von der Leyen. So there you go. Will we make concessions on migration, fishing and potentially a youth mobility scheme? Would that be a betrayal of Brexit? This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got lots more coming up today's show. We are going to be with our Home and Security editor, Mark White, who's going to bring us the latest on the Israel-Iran conflict. That's next.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
You could, if you're getting a bit bored later on and you've got some free time, tune in to Friends. Remember that?
It's on somewhere in the world all the time.
Probably one of those
incredible.
obscure TV channels.
It's a big anniversary today, because apparently today was 30 years ago, was when it first hit the screens.
In 1994. Just before, or just after I was born, 89 me. The show ran for 10 series, becoming one of the most popular sitcoms of all time, and it scored numerous accolades, including 62 Primetime Emmy nominations. Joining us now in the studio to talk everything Friends and the big anniversary is showbiz reporter Steph Tetchy and my friend as well.
Happy Friends-iversary, guys. Yes, today is quite a monumental day for one of the most incredible sitcoms to ever hit our TV screens.
That it's on somewhere in the world.
There's millions of people around the world who are watching reruns, watching either streaming of Friends, and it doesn't get boring for people. I think, 30 years later, just that, it's such a simple concept. 6 New Yorkers just following their lives and their friendships. It proved a hit with loads of viewers worldwide.
The casting was superb.
It was so incredible. And the thing is, these were all fresh faces at the time. It wasn't like they picked, people who were at the top of the game then. And I think it was such a hit with viewers is because they became our friends as well over the years. But obviously today is played with a bit of poignancy because, there is one friend that is missing. And the creators of the show, Martha Kaufman and David Crane, saying that today is a bit fraught for both the cast because of Matthew Perry's passing. And he was known as one of the funniest friends, as most people would describe him as. And so today is kind of marred with sadness.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking... This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
OK, good afternoon, Britain. It is now 1:23, and fears are mounting that the Middle East is on the cusp of an all-out war after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu swore Iran will pay for the large-scale missile attack it launched on Israel yesterday evening. Now, whilst many of the missiles were shot down, the size of the attack nevertheless represents a significant escalation in this conflict. Western countries in particular are now scrambling to prevent it from escalating further. Defence Secretary John Healey, he's in Cyprus today as the UK steps up preparations to evacuate British civilians from Lebanon. He also confirmed that British forces were involved in efforts to defend Israel from Iran's ballistic missile barrage last night. Well, with me in the studio is GBNews Home and Security Editor Mark White. The scenes overnight, quite extraordinary. If that Iron Dome had not been there to protect Israel, it could have been flattened.
Yes, indeed. The missile defence system that Israel has, the Iron Dome is one part of that. They have medium and long-range missile defences as well. All were engaged in taking down these targets. Ballistic missiles, many more than were fired back in April when Iran fired missiles and drones towards Israel at that point. On this occasion, they were aiming, according to Israel's UK ambassador, for civilian locations. Now, what we're looking at the moment is Beirut in Lebanon, and we should say, while all eyes understandably have been focused on what happened last night with these ballistic missile attacks into Israel, in the north of Israel into Lebanon, very intense fighting and airstrikes continuing there, and we are receiving breaking news that the first Israeli military casualty has been reported. A commander of a company of soldiers killed in fierce fighting in a border town in southern Lebanon. Hezbollah, indeed, the terror group, saying that they are engaged in fierce fighting in one particular border town. So that initial incursion, very limited in nature. It looks like that will have to expand because the policy of the Israeli military here is to push this terrorist organisation further back, to create a buffer zone so that they can't fire the missiles and artillery right over the border into northern Israel. Because remember, Emily, for the last year now, we have had more than 70,000 Israeli civilians who were in homes in these border communities who've not been able to return to their homes, who've been evacuated and who've been living in hotels and other accommodation in Haifa and other parts of Israel. The Israeli military, the Israeli government say that is just intolerable. They can't accept that any longer, and that's why we're seeing this operation to take out Hezbollah. But clearly going back, of course, to the images there, the ballistic missiles that came in, are very, very concerning scenes, because quite a few of those ballistic missiles impacted the ground. Now, what we understand happened, Emily, is the sophistication of the aerial array defence system is such that it can track the trajectory of these missiles, and those that they know and believe are going to land in open areas, away from populated areas, they will often let those missiles impact. So that's what we were seeing there.
And there are those who celebrated and will continue to celebrate what Iran did there, attacking Israel with those missiles. There will be those in the West who have celebrated that and want to see more attacks on Israel, the Israeli state. We understand that there were 2 explosions at the Israeli embassy in Copenhagen. We also heard from Alicia Kearns, the shadow foreign minister, that potentially there could be Iranian sleeper cells, terrorist sleeper cells. Let's have a little listen to what she said.
But also at home, we need to take note of what is happening. Over the last 24 hours, Hezbollah have said that they are now considering launching international terror cells around the world to harm friends of Israel. That does mean the UK. The Home Office is to make sure that we are making sure that what is taking place in the Middle East does not cause blood on our streets.
OK, well, that was Alicia Kearns saying that potentially this has raised the terror threat over here in the West and in the United Kingdom.
Well, there's no doubt about that because, you know, the conflict may be thousands of miles from the UK and other Western nations, but the tentacles of the Iranian regime and its related terrorist groups spread far and wide. And it's not just the terror threat, there absolutely potentially is that. You mentioned those apparent attacks on the Israeli embassies in Denmark and in Sweden last night. We've seen attacks in France, in Germany, here in the UK, in Hartlepool, in which lives were lost that have been linked to the conflict in Gaza. So every reason to believe that the same issues could arise with a widening conflict that now takes in Iran directly. And then there's the other issues, Emily, that people back home really need to consider, and that's the economic shockwaves from this conflict. We're already seeing a surge in the oil price. We've seen 2 commercial ships in the past 24 hours struck by another Iranian terror group, the Houthis, in Yemen, and that's forcing these commercial shipping companies to reroute their vessels. Instead of going through the most direct route to Europe through the Suez Canal, they're rerouting right around Africa, adding thousands of miles to the journey and many thousands of pounds extra costs in transportation. That will ultimately be borne by, of course, hard-pressed consumers here in the UK and elsewhere in Europe who are already facing a cost of living crisis.
We could see a resurgence of inflation, that we've just got back down to the target level.
Absolutely.
We could see this impact the pound in our pocket. Just lastly, where does Israel go from now? We're hearing that, of course, they will fight back, take this to Iran, they will retaliate. What might that look like?
Well, interestingly, the Israeli ambassador to the UK, Sipi Hotoveli, has been saying today there will be a very severe response from Israel to ensure that Iran can no longer fire its ballistic missiles at Israel. She said quite clearly that civilians who were preparing for the Jewish New Year were targeted by Iran in this ballistic missile strike overnight. So we await to see just what that level of response will be from Israel, because we've already heard from Iran that if Israel responds, they are going to hit back even harder. And that is the real concern here, that we enter this downward spiral into a very real hot war between Iran and between Israel. They're already at war in many senses anyway, because it's Iran's aligned terror groups that are fighting Israel, as proxies of Iran. Now, if there's a direct conflict, it won't just be Iran, but the proxies that are in Syria, that are in Iraq, of course in Lebanon, in Gaza, all will be involved in the fighting against Israel.
And of course, it's not long till that anniversary of the Hamas terror attack.
Just 5 days.
Just 5 days at a time. So the security service, I'm sure, will be working overtime. Thank you very much indeed, Mark White, our Home and Security Editor. We'll speak to you again later in the show. Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Stick with us. We've got a lot more coming up, but let's get the headlines with Tatiana.
Emily, thank you and good afternoon. The top stories. Well, all 4 Tory leadership candidates have given their speeches on the final day of the party conference in Birmingham. Shadow Security Minister Tom Tugendhat saying the Tories have led the fight for freedom. The Conservative candidate said he's had enough of the lack of principle and clarity. Mr Tugendhat said the general election was bruising and that the Tories need to restore trust as he set out his pitch to be the party's next leader.
Leadership is not about empty promises. It's not about cheap rhetoric or government by management consultancy. It's not about managing decline, and it's not about talking our country down. Leadership is about making choices that serve our country and our people best. I promise you that as your leader, I will serve our country. I will lead with conviction. I will act decisively. My mission is the prosperity and happiness of the British people. Together, we can win.
Well, Kemi Badenoch has vowed to make the Chancellor wriggle and the Prime Minister sweat. She rounded up these speeches this afternoon, adding young Conservatives have been let down by the party.
A new political force has risen. something I have been fighting all my political career: identity politics. Like the 1970s, we face a battle of ideas against the left and its desire for ever greater social and economic control. It is socialism returned, socialism in a suit.
And in other news, Sir Keir Starmer says he wants to put the UK-EU relationship back on a stable, positive footing as he met European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen in Brussels. Von der Leyen said the close alignment on international matters was a good foundation for talks on the UK-EU relationship. The Prime Minister is in Brussels to meet European Union chiefs with a promise to put the Brexit years behind us, he said, and form a closer relationship with the bloc. He aims to push for a better trading relationship and greater cooperation on defence and security measures. It's his first visit to Brussels as Prime Minister.
I firmly believe that the British public wants a return to pragmatic, sensible leadership when it comes to dealing with our closest neighbours, to make Brexit work and to deliver in their interests, to find ways to boost economic growth, strengthen our security and tackle shared challenges like irregular migration and climate change.
And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, good morning and welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Well, across the south there is plenty of cloud today with some showers possible at times, but in the north we do have plenty of fine and dry weather. And the reason for this is that high pressure is generally dominating the weather in the north, but we still have an area of low pressure down to the southeast, which is bringing us that cloud and those showers, perhaps some longer spells of rain and drizzle at times too. But across Northern Ireland, Scotland, northern parts of England, plenty of fine and dry weather, perhaps just a bit more cloud at times in the afternoon, but still plenty of bright and sunny spells in between. Temperatures generally are around about average, but it is going to be feeling colder under that cloud. But in those sheltered spots, particularly western parts of Scotland, it should feel rather pleasant where you catch the sunshine. Now, heading into the evening, that cloud is going to stick around across southern parts for a time, still with some spots of rain and drizzle and some showers moving into eastern coasts, not really dying away until the overnight period. But across Northern Ireland, Scotland, once again, northern parts of England, plenty of late evening sunshine before it goes down. However, as the sun does start to go down, it is going to be feeling quite cold overnight, likely to see some frost, particularly in northern parts of the country, and in rural spots as well, likely to see some mist and fog overnight too, which might just be a little bit slow to clear by the time we reach the morning. That cloud across the south will eventually ease away in those showers too, but you might still just catch the odd one or two, particularly across parts of East Anglia. But as I say, generally a cold night overall, particularly in the north, where we're likely to see that frost by the time you wake up in the morning. Now, generally though, Thursday is the better day. We've got high pressure building, which means lots of fine and dry weather across the country. Still a slight breeze around coastal areas, which might just add on to the wind chill there, and still just the possibility of the odd shower across East Anglia. But otherwise, another fine, dry day for many, just perhaps a bit more cloud in the west later.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. In Lancashire, the M65 is closed in both directions. No way through between Accrington at Junction 8 and Burnley at 10. Investigation works underway from a previous collision, so queues on surrounding routes, not least the A679 Accrington Road. Eastbound M62 away from the M6, that's the Croft interchange at 10, the Birchwood 11 slow going, following an earlier obstruction on the road. Berkshire, westbound M4, Field to Newbury, 12 to Junction 13, a collision means heavy going, 2 lanes coned off. And then the M25, firstly clockwise, the QE2 bridge still slow, following an earlier bump there, but all lanes back open. Anti-clock, 2 lanes shut just after Waltham Abbey at 26, the queue back to 27, a breakdown being recovered. Also means delays clockwise from Potters Bar 24 as well. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Well,
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It is now 1:38. Now, of course, all four Conservative leadership contenders have now made their final rallying calls to the voters, to their fellow MPs. Entering the stage first was Tom Tugendhat. He chose to focus on creating a Conservative revolution to drive growth, stating migration has cost us too much in the last 30 years because we haven't invested enough in homegrown talent. He even adopted David Cameron's famous £100,000 cap. £100,000 cap on net migration got there in the end. Next, Shadow Home Secretary James Cleverly. He was keen to make sure party members were proud of the Conservatives' record in office, including his own, of course, attacking Reform UK for being, in his words, a pale imitation of a great party. He reminded conference the Tories delivered Brexit and he himself cut migration. Well, not everyone was as positive. Frontrunner Robert Jenrick admitted the country does not trust the Conservatives, saying they should never fail their people again and build a new Conservative party. Yes, we heard that a lot. New Conservative party. He went out to set out his main policies, including securing our borders by leaving the ECHR. He said if there's a choice between leave and remain, he's for leave. And to close the show was Kemi Badenoch. She renewed her calls for renewal by taking the shackles off the economy and making Britain believe in itself once again. By next week, only 2 will be left. They'll then go head-to-head here on GB News on October the 17th before the Conservative membership decides who will become the new leader of the Conservative Party. So there you go. Well, let's go live now to Tom Harwood, who's in Birmingham for the conference. That was a little summary I gave of the various speeches. You're in Birmingham. You heard it all firsthand.
Absolutely, and I'm with Chris Hope, who was in the room. And Chris, you've been talking to party members. What did they make of it?
Yeah, so random people leaving the hall, Tom, about a dozen or so. 10, I reckon, were backing James Cleverly. Some had jumped from Tom Tugendhat and Robert Jenrick. Fascinating. I think he definitely won the room. Maybe not to be unexpected. He's a former party chairman. He knows how to push the buttons of his party. He also spent the most money in there, £10 billion axing of stamp duty to get the property market moving. He wants to increase defence spending to 3%. I think another candidate said that too, but he spent the most money in the hall. Wasn't challenged about how he'd pay for that. That may occur if he gets to the final 2 in the hustings, but he definitely won. Maybe it was the podium what won it. He was the only candidate who chose to have the podium. It gave him authority on a big stage. The other 3 looked a bit lost from where I was standing.
That's very interesting. You're saying that people who had come into the room supporting other candidates switched to James Cleverly in the course of this afternoon.
And what this means is interesting because next Tuesday, the Mel Stride votes from the last round go to get farmed out amongst the candidates, probably benefiting Cleverly, not Tom Tugendhat. It now looks like Tom Tugendhat was the weakest today. I wonder whether he might drop out the next round, and that will further cement Cleverly into the final 2 next Thursday morning. The question now for me is it Cleverly versus Kemi Badenoch or Robert Jenrick?
That is really interesting because at the start of this contest, I think a lot of people were thinking Kemi Badenoch is a shoo-in, but she's had a few errors of this.
Well, she came across as a kind of Trussite. She talked to attack the Treasury. I think she's offering revolution for a party which is a bit scarred by revolution post the Liz Truss 40 days premiership. So it's a kind of an attack on the blob, the state, everything. And does this party want more drama, or do they want the comfort of a former Home Secretary, party chairman, Foreign Secretary who can just steady as she goes? But how much trouble is this party in, Tom? 121 MPs. Does it need steady as she goes leader who can get them over the line in the next election, or a complete reboot? And that's what Jenrick was offering as well.
That's really interesting because if we look at what the bookies are saying, it's now Cleverly's odds have been slashed. Jenrick still out ahead. It could be a Jenrick-Cleverly runoff. Perhaps that's the central prediction.
Yes.
But it's easy to see Kemi getting in there too. But that would be a very interesting comparison. Either one. Cleverly offering this almost Boris Johnson-like positivity on the stage.
He channeled Reagan, didn't he?
But as you said, with these spending pledges and tax cuts, where's the detail?
Also, question marks about some of his views on trans issues. He gave an answer yesterday, overlooked by many journalists, about he sounded quite Penny Mordaunt. And I think when it comes down to the kind of final 2, if he's there, those areas will get pulled out. We don't really know where he stands on those areas. He's never been asked before about them. I think we might see him quite socially liberal on areas which the base may not like, and that's to come, I think. But yeah, to me, I think the MPs really should offer a left and right candidate for the membership, and it's looking increasingly like Cleverly against one of Jenrick or Kemi Badenoch.
Which is fascinating, because I think if you were to speak to James Cleverly, he wouldn't cast himself as a left winger. He's the only one of the four to have backed Brexit.
Yeah.
He's been an
early Boris in 2008.
Early Boris declares himself a Thatcherite. I mean, is there that much ideological difference between these candidates, or are they more presentationally?
Well, it's what's the prescription. So you've got Kemi Badenoch, she's going to shake up everything. You've got this new Conservatives idea, the 5 plan from Robert Jenrick. They want to really kick the tyres of this whole party. Cleverly is saying, I think it's okay, let's just be bold about what we want to do and be proud of that. The question is, how much trouble is it in? Is a Cleverly prospectus enough to get over a 170-seat majority, or do you need to have a proper root and branch reform, which might take 2 terms?
Were you surprised by James Cleverly's performance today?
I wasn't, after chairing the 4 hours I had to sit with these people, including Cleverly yesterday afternoon. He got the only standing ovation. He knows how to push the right buttons for the members here. I think he has won the conference. He's had the best conference, James Cleverly, without question. I think Kemi Badenoch, she doesn't like all the press hassle, but nor do other spokesmen or MPs have been asked about maternity pay. Why is that even an issue when it shouldn't be after that interview on the radio on Sunday? So I think she's had a questionable one. Tom Tugendhat has faded away. I think he was weaker today for some reason, although he was good in the Q&A with members. And Jenrick held his own. So that's the order. I would, if I was ranking them at the end of 4 days, I would say James Cleverly, Robert Jenrick, Kemi Badenoch, Tom Tugendhat, in that order.
Really interesting stuff. Chris Hope, thank you so much for talking us through that from your expert perspective in the hall, and of course having spoken to all 4 of them at length over the last couple of days. Back to you, Emily.
Yes, he's probably spoken to them more than he has his own family at this stage. Christopher Hope, very interesting to get that inside perspective, though. This is Good Afternoon Britain. On GB News, we've got lots more coming up on today's show. A Christian school worker claims she was dismissed unfairly because of her Christian beliefs. We'll have the very latest on that, and also we'll be turning our attention back to Brussels as Keir Starmer launches his charm offensive with the EU.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
You know, is the fact that electric blanket sales going up actually a good thing? This means that people are switched on to the problems that the winter might hold, that they might have some defence against it, or is it a real indictment of a Labour government that they aren't going to be able to, support elderly people in their hour of need?
Good morning, by the way.
Morning.
I think the sale of electric blankets may well be because we've had this cold snap because of the Arctic weather coming in from the north. However, I think it's an absolute reality that, as your clip said, that over 800,000 elderly people who are eligible for the winter fuel allowance, who can get pension credits, are struggling to apply. And so what is absolutely essential at the moment is that all of those older people who are eligible for pension credits do apply and do get what's owed to them. The benefits are owed to them. And the average that people will get through pension credits is about £78 a week. So that's definitely going to make a massive difference to people who are really struggling.
What can organisations like yours do to encourage people to, educate themselves on technology and make that first step into the digital world, which is very intimidating at times?
Absolutely, and that's what we do at Good Things Foundation. So we're a national charity. We work all across the whole of the UK. And in your clip there, you had Links Digital, and they're a member of what we call the National Digital Inclusion Network, which is a network of local charities, small local community organisations, food banks, job centres, old people's clubs. So any organisation at that local level.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This Sunday, join me, Camilla Tominey, for an exclusive interview with one of the most controversial, influential and unique political figures of our time. Boris Johnson will be in studio discussing his new memoir, Unleashed, the gripping story of how he dealt with plotting politicians, problematic princes and a pandemic. From Boris bikes to Brexit and everything else in between. This Sunday at 9:30 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It is now 1:49. And now the Court of Appeal will hear the case of Christy Higgs, a Christian school worker who claims she was unfairly dismissed for gross misconduct after posting Facebook messages criticising LGBT+ lessons in primary schools. Now, Higgs, who says her Christian beliefs were unlawfully discriminated against, she's appealing after a previous tribunal ruled in favour of the school. Now, the appeal could set a precedent for religious freedom in the workplace. Well, to find out more, I have GB News reporter Adam Cherry with me. Adam, thank you very much indeed. Can you tell us a little bit more about this intriguing case?
Yeah, so the hearing's been ongoing for the last 3 hours. We're expecting to hear a verdict sometime tomorrow. But I'm joined now by one of Christy's supporters, who is Felix. Felix, you're here to support the case, but also you have a similar story of your own. Can you tell us a little bit about that and why you're here?
Oh, yeah. My case goes far back, as in 2015, when I was expelled from the University of Sheffield, mainly because I took part in a debate where I expressed my Christian views. I was eventually expelled from the University of Sheffield, went through the court system, Court of Appeal. I went to the Court of Appeal and I won my case. So I went back to the University of Sheffield and I completed my social work course. Immediately I completed the course, I found a job, went to the interview, and my interview was good and I was offered the job. But a couple of months later, the job offer was, they withdrew the job offer. And I found that that is because they came across the debate that I had online and my case with the University of Sheffield. So took them to court, and we had a ruling not too long ago, but we've appealed that ruling and I'll be back to court again at some point.
So you yourself have also appealed a ruling. They ruled against you as well, right? Did they give any justification for that? What did they say?
Well, my case was a little bit complex in the sense that I won part of my case and I lost part of it. But I still felt that based on the comments made by the judges, it still has far-reaching implications in terms of freedom of speech for Christians.
So this is really a question of religious freedoms and freedom of speech in the country. Do you think we have a serious problem in this country? Would you like the government to adjust their tack on this in any way?
Oh, absolutely, we have a serious problem in this country. And of course, you understand I wasn't born in this country. I was born in Cameroon in West Africa. And before I came to this country, I looked up to the UK as a beacon of democracy. You come here, you say your mind. As far as you do it respectfully, you shouldn't get into trouble. But you know, now I know that's not really the case. We hear of inclusivity, but it doesn't really, you're not part of that process if you have different views.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Felix, for joining me. I appreciate it, your time on GB News with us. Emily, the appeal will wrap up, as I say, sometime tomorrow. It's been going on for quite some time already today. And as Felix said, it's a real question of religious freedoms and the tension with freedom of speech and businesses reacting to those comments.
Yes, it's very interesting indeed. We see quite a lot of this, people being dismissed and then challenging it on the basis of freedom of speech, freedom of religious belief, and so on. Well, we'll check in tomorrow and see what exactly happens there. Adam Cherry, thank you very much for being outside the High Court Justice for us. Thank you very much indeed. Well, lots of you have been getting in touch about your views on Starmer's trip to the European Union. I think it's fair to say that quite a few of you are worried that Keir Starmer essentially wants to take us closer and closer to the European Union, almost back into the European Union. Brian, for example, he says the gameplay over the past 30 years has been Labour taking us into the EU and signing treaties that take our freedoms away. Then they're replaced by the Conservatives who carry on the status quo while pretending to believe in Brexit. Then Labour get voted back in and sign more treaties that take us back into the EU, and the cycle continues. Angela says Keir Starmer should sort out our country instead of swanning and hiding in Europe. OK. And Elizabeth says, what part does Starmer not understand that we are no longer in the European Union? He thinks he's a great leader. All he's doing is selling this island down the river. She goes on to make her comments known about make her views known about Ursula von der Leyen. So there we go. Keep your views coming in, because it does look like the EU will demand rather a lot of concessions from us if we are to rearrange this post-Brexit deal. We're going to have more on that. We're going to be in Brussels in just a few moments after this short break and see exactly what Sir Keir Starmer is up to. Stay with us.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning and welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Well, across the south there is plenty of cloud today with some showers possible at times, but in the north we do have plenty of fine and dry weather. And the reason for this is that high pressure is generally dominating the weather in the north, but we still have an area of low pressure down to the southeast, which is bringing us that cloud and those showers, perhaps some longer spells of rain and drizzle at times too. But across Northern Ireland, Scotland, northern parts of England, plenty of fine and dry weather, perhaps just a bit more cloud at times in the afternoon, but still plenty of bright and sunny spells in between. Temperatures generally are around about average, but it is going to be feeling colder under that cloud. But in those sheltered spots, particularly western parts of Scotland, it should feel rather pleasant where you catch the sunshine. Now, heading into the evening, that cloud is going to stick around across southern parts for a time, still with some spots of rain and drizzle and some showers moving into eastern coasts, not really dying away until the overnight period. But across Northern Ireland, Scotland, once again, northern parts of England, plenty of late evening sunshine before it goes down. However, as the sun does start to go down, it is going to be feeling quite cold overnight, likely to see some frost, particularly in northern parts of the country, and in rural spots as well, likely to see some mist and fog overnight too, which might just be a little bit slow to clear by the time we reach the morning. That cloud across the south will eventually ease away in those showers too, but you might still just catch the odd one or two, particularly across parts of East Anglia. But as I say, generally a cold night overall, particularly in the north, where we're likely to see that frost by the time you wake up in the morning. Now, generally though, Thursday is the better day. We've got high pressure building, which means lots of fine and dry weather across the country. Still a slight breeze around coastal areas, which might just add on to the wind chill there, and still just the possibility of the odd shower across East Anglia. But otherwise, another fine, dry day for many, just perhaps a bit more cloud in the west later.
We can expect clear skies, leading to a light and warm day ahead. Lovely. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark Meets and My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Wednesday, the 2nd of October. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood. As the Conservative Party conference wraps up, it seems that maybe, just maybe, James Cleverly has had a surprising moment.
Interesting. Elsewhere, Benjamin Netanyahu warns Iran it will pay for last night's missile attacks on Israel. This as the IDF sends more troops into southern Lebanon. How will Israel retaliate, and has this latest escalation raised the domestic terror threat here in the UK? And Keir Starmer, he's in Brussels to kick off his bid to reset Britain's relationship with the European Union. But at what cost? The EU is reportedly demanding concessions on migration, fishing, and even freedom of movement for young people. Well, Tom, you say now that the momentum is with James Cleverly.
I wouldn't have thought that this morning. I wouldn't have thought that going into this conference several days ago. But I have to say, it's almost uniformly accepted that the standout performance of those speeches earlier this morning and this afternoon was James Cleverly. He had the audience in the palm of his hand. He had the most people standing up of the standing ovations. He clearly dominated the stage across of all four candidates. And that's surprising. I would have thought that perhaps Tom Tugendhat, a very assured performer, would have done better than he did. I would have thought that perhaps Kemi Badenoch, who is such a loved contestant amongst the membership, would have had the audience react in a stronger way than they did. But no, it was James Cleverly who came to the fore, surprising for some, but a big boost to his campaign.
Very interesting indeed. We did know that Robert Jenrick was a little ahead in that polling that's taken place. Perhaps things will change. Perhaps things will change. Thank you very much indeed, Tom. We will check in with you in a little bit, but we should get the news headlines with Tatiana.
Emily, thank you and good afternoon. The top stories. All four Tory leadership candidates have given their speeches on the final day of the party conference in Birmingham. Shadow Security Minister Tom Tugendhat saying the Tories have led the fight for freedom. The Conservative candidate said he's had enough of the lack of principle and clarity. Mr Tugendhat said the general election was bruising and that the Tories need to restore trust as he set out his pitch to be the party's next leader.
Leadership is not about empty promises. It's not about cheap rhetoric or government by management consultancy. It's not about managing decline, and it's not about talking our country down. Leadership is about making choices that serve our country and our people best. I promise you that as your leader, I will serve our country. I will lead with conviction. I will act decisively. My mission is the prosperity and happiness of the British people. Together, we can win.
James Cleverly opened his speech at the Conservative Party conference with an apology to members, adding that the parliamentary wing of the party had let them down.
Sorry on behalf of the Conservative Parliamentary Party who let you down. And we have to be better, much better. And under my leadership, we will be. The British people are never wrong. The British people told us to go and sort ourselves out. Let's not make them tell us again.
Robert Jenrick said the Tories need to create a new Conservative Party that's built on the rock of our proudest traditions and noblest values. Mr Jenrick said we must stand for our nation, our culture, our identity.
Why is it that so much of the British establishment seems to put Britain last? I'm told that we only have enough munitions to last a few weeks in war. And yet our country is giving foreign aid to parts of the world richer than our own. So if I am your leader, I will stand for cutting our bloated foreign aid budget and for spending 3% of GDP on our defence.
Kemi Badenoch has vowed to make the Chancellor wriggle and the Prime Minister sweat. She rounded up the speeches today, adding young Conservatives have been let down by the party.
A new political force has risen, something I have been fighting all my political career: identity politics. Like the 1970s, we face a battle of ideas against the left and its desire for ever greater social and economic control. It is socialism returned, socialism in a suit.
In other news, Sir Keir Starmer says he wants to put the UK-EU relationship back on a stable, positive footing as he met European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen in Brussels. Von der Leyen said the close alignment on international matters was a good foundation for talks on the UK-EU relationship. The Prime Minister's in Brussels to meet European Union chiefs with a promise to put the Brexit years behind us and form a closer relationship with the bloc. He aims to push for a better trading relationship and greater cooperation on defence and security measures. It's his first visit to Brussels as Prime Minister.
Utterly condemn this attempt by the Iranian regime to harm innocent Israelis. It cannot be tolerated. We stand with Israel and we recognise her right to self-defence.
Well, that was the Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer speaking last night in a televised address, saying that he publicly supports Israel's right to self-defence. And that's as Israel will reportedly launch a significant retaliation to Iran's missile attack within days that could target oil production facilities. That's according to the US-based news site Axios. Last night, Israel's Prime Minister said Iran had made a big mistake with its attack and will pay for it. Both the UK and the US have confirmed they've supported Israel in shooting down over 180 Iranian missiles headed for the country. The UK Defence Secretary John Healey said forces played their part to prevent further escalation in the region. Mr Healey is visiting Cyprus to meet troops who are preparing for the possibility of evacuating British citizens from Lebanon. The attack came in retaliation to Israel's air and ground operation in Lebanon against Iranian-backed terror group Hezbollah and the assassination of their leader on Friday. And a Metropolitan Police marksman is due to go on trial over the fatal shooting of Chris Carber. 40-year-old Martin Blake is accused of the murder of 24-year-old Mr Carber in South London in September 2 years ago. Mr Carber died after being shot once in the head through the windscreen of an Audi car in Streatham. Blake has denied the charge against him. His trial is expected to go on for up to 3 weeks. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. I'll have more news in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to Good Afternoon Britain. It is now 8 minutes past 2. Now, as we've been discussing, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, he's in Brussels for key talks with EU leaders. He wants to reset our relationship with the European Union. But what exactly might Brussels demand in return? Well, I'm joined by GB News political correspondent Olivia Utley, who is in Brussels for us. Olivia, bring us up to date.
So we've heard very warm words from both sides after the meeting between Keir Starmer and Ursula von der Leyen this morning. They've both said that they are keen to reset relations, and it's sounding from the EU side as though they're happier to have conversations with this government than they were with the last Conservative government. All of that said, when push comes to shove, it's going to be about the negotiations, and as we know, well, as David Cameron found out back in 2013, the EU is a very, very tough negotiator indeed. Warm words will only get Keir Starmer so far. What the EU would like to see is, in the first instance, a youth mobility scheme between the UK and the EU. That would mean that young people under the age of 24, I think it is, would be able to travel between the EU and the UK to work, live or study, quite similar to sort of Erasmus scheme. Obviously, that would go down very badly indeed with Brexiteers in the UK, many of whom voted for Brexit in order to take back control of the borders. And actually, there are plenty of people in Labour who don't like the sound of it either. Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, who is in charge of immigration, has expressed her worries about a scheme like that bringing the overall immigration numbers up. There is also some concern that the EU might demand, France is very, very keen on this, and other EU coastal states are behind it, access to the UK's fishing waters in return for any sort of closer deal on energy, for example. That's something that Keir Starmer really wants to talk about, and veterinary trades. That fishing deal would again go down very, very badly with English coastal communities, particularly fishermen, many of whom voted for Brexit. So there isn't really an easy solution here for Keir Starmer today. There's going to be lots more talks over the next few hours. He has all sorts of meetings coming up, ending with a Q&A with journalists this afternoon. So let's see where we get to by 6 o'clock today. At the moment, we're hearing lots of smiles, lots of warm handshakes, but very little actual concrete progress.
Yes, there's also been rumours, I suppose, for the last few weeks that perhaps Ursula von der Leyen might demand that we join their migrants' return deal in one way or another, which could potentially see some kind of quota when it comes to asylum seekers from the European Union. Is that something that is formally being talked about?
Well, that is a rumour that's been going around for the last sort of 6 months or so. Keir Starmer has denied that it is something that he would consider, and it is hard to see why the UK would accept a deal like that, because yes, we have a large number of small boat migrants. We talk about it on GB News a lot, but that is dwarfed in comparison to the number of migrants coming to the whole of the EU. And as quite a populous country in the EU, the quota of migrants that we would have to take if we joined up to that returns deal would be large and would probably eclipse the number of small boat migrants who are coming over here. So in my mind, it's relatively unlikely that Keir Starmer would accept something like that. That said, he has built up expectations quite high. He said over and over again during the campaign that one of his goals as Prime Minister would be to reset relations with the EU. And it is possible that if that is the only deal that the EU would take, that Keir Starmer might go for it. But I think we could expect a pretty big backlash across Brexit voting communities if he were to go for it.
Yes, I can imagine so. Olivia Utley, thank you very much indeed for being in Brussels for us, our political correspondent there. Yes, how would you at home feel if we were to hand fishing licences back to the European Union, or indeed to accept some kind of youth mobility scheme, or indeed take part in some kind of quota system when it comes to asylum seekers and migrants within the European Union? Would that be a complete betrayal of leaving the European Union, a betrayal of Brexit? I'm sure many of you would see it as such. Do let me know. Get in touch. gbnews.com/your say is the way to do so. But let's turn back to Birmingham, where 4 Conservative leadership contenders, all of them, have made their final calls to voters. Entering the stage was Tom Tugendhat first. He focused on creating a Conservative revolution to drive growth. He stated migration has cost us too much in the last 30 years. He even adopted David Cameron's famous 100,000 cap on net migration.
But a cap alone won't work. This is about visas, not about foreign courts. Let me tell you something that my opponents probably won't. This isn't simple. We issued the visas because businesses need the staff for our care homes and our hospitals to look after our families. So how do we square this circle? Well, we need to fix migration by fixing the gaps in education and skills, in transport and in housing, so that we can recruit at home and not abroad.
But one man was quite proud of the Conservative Party legacy, Shadow Home Secretary James Cleverly. He reminded conference that the Tories delivered Brexit and he wanted to make sure everyone remembered his record in government. Now, not everyone was as positive about the past. Frontrunner Robert Jenrick admitted the country doesn't trust the Tories, saying we should never fail our people again and build a new Conservative Party. He went on to set out his main policies, including securing our borders. And to close the show was Kemi Badenoch. She called for renewal by taking the shackles off the economy. And she said she wasn't happy with the direction the country is going in. So, where do we stand? By next week, only 2 will be left. They'll then go on head-to-head here on GB News. October the 17th is the date. Put it in your diary before the Conservative membership decides who will become the new leader of the Conservative Party. OK, so that's out of the way. Let's go live now to Tom Harwood, who's in Birmingham for the conference. Tom, thank you very much indeed. I believe you are with our political editor, Christopher Hope. Take it away.
I am indeed, and Christopher Hope was there in the hall for those speeches. What was your reaction?
Yes, I was in all 4. I think that in order, we had Tom Tugendhat started slowly and didn't really make much of an impression. I thought Robert Jenrick was better, more energetic. I thought James Cleverly won the day. He got most of the audience on their feet, about a third of the audience on their feet, but most biggest reaction. And Kemi Badenoch was interesting, exciting, maybe for some people, maybe a bit too Trussite for a party still traumatised by the drama of Liz Truss's time in government.
Now, you've also been speaking to people as they left the hall. What did you find?
Well, that was really striking. So I basically randomly chose people as they left. Well, we'll see shortly, but I did about a dozen interviews, virtually all for James Cleverly. Let's listen.
Who won? James Cleverly, hands down. What charisma, what leadership. He's got to be the future.
Who won? Mr. Cleverly for me.
And were you a Cleverly person before you came in? Who were you backing before?
I was Tom or Kemi, but I definitely made it.
Switching from Tom Tugendhat, from Kemi to James Cleverly.
Today, very impressive, I felt.
And why is that?
Well, he was clear, he was statesmanlike, and he said all the things that I wanted to hear.
Oh, I'll tell you what, they're all great candidates. I love them all as individuals, and I think James got the crowd. But Kemi is so clever. It's so difficult.
Can I say 2?
Yes.
Cleverly and Kemi.
James Cleverly did so well. The standing ovation was so much. He talks with so much confidence and was most liked by many.
James, I just think he has the stature of a future Prime Minister.
Today, definitely James Cleverly. As you see, I don't wear any of them. I haven't made my mind up yet, but he actually did very well today.
I think it was hard to say, but I think overall, I think it's maybe sort of Robert Jenrick. I think he overall came across, I think, as the best sort of overall candidate, I thought.
Really interesting stuff there, Chris.
Yes.
And these were randomly selected members of the party.
Yes, I mean, there's obviously teams around the campaigns, but they weren't involved. That was me just selecting random people leaving the hall, and all but 2 or 3 were for James Cleverly. So clearly in the hall, he won the audience. Maybe it's no surprise. He's a former party chairman. He knows how to push the right buttons. And maybe on the TV screens, maybe Kemi Badenoch did quite well. We're hearing anecdotally off social media. She was quite good when the camera's right on her. I wonder, Tom, whether it was something as basic as the podium what won it. Because he had a podium, James Cleverly, stood behind it, planted himself there, had the authority of it being a former Home Office, Home Secretary, Foreign Secretary, party chairman, so it goes on. The other 3 wandered around waving their hands on a big platform, like David Cameron did in 2005. And David Davis then had a podium. Cameron won it, but Davis didn't. Maybe it's a reversal of the debate then.
And it was a very different stage in 2005. You were there, I wasn't, but it was in the round, was it not?
Yes, I think it was. That may have been IGS in the round. I think it was actually in the same hall.
OK.
But no question back then, David Cameron with a more informal chat with no notes did well, I think. But I think, I mean, in the hall, James Cleverly won, and it looks increasingly likely, I think, that Cleverly could be in the final two if support goes from the Mel Stride votes in the last round towards Cleverly, and then maybe, if it looks like Tom Tugendhat drops out next time, those are two centrist Tory MPs. Cleverly like to benefit, he'll be there, and who will he take on? Kemi Badenoch or Robert Jenrick, both offering a dramatic reboot of the party. I think Kemi Badenoch has the most drama in her. You talked then about fighting against left-wing nonsense. I mean, it was pure, some of the language is pure Liz Truss. Does this party want more drama like that? They've got more time to think about it, and there's no jeopardy. They can't crash the economy not being in government. So maybe what they do need is a reboot with a kind of Kemi energy. Against that, you've got Robert Jenrick with New Conservatives, New Labour, rethinking how this movement works. So both of them are offering some change, both from the right. So if the MPs get it right, they can offer someone from the left and someone from the right, and then we'll see members choosing.
History shows us that generally the party faithful do back the right candidate rather than the left candidate. Liz Truss won over Rishi Sunak, Boris Johnson won over Jeremy Hunt, yes. IDS won over Ken Clarke.
That's right.
Although David Cameron did after 3 election defeats.
Davis, he was right wing.
Yes. So
these guys here, this party, has to work out what is the problem and what's the answer.
And big, interesting revelation there. Perhaps it was the podium what won it. Wandering around on stage, perhaps not working as well for these candidates as it did for David Cameron. Gosh, 25 years ago. Well, or 20 years ago. 25 years ago? 21 years ago.
That's it.
That's
Tom,
something. Yes. Emily, back to you.
Tom, I was just thinking 2005. I'm surprised you weren't there, you know, reporting the keen bean you are. That would have been very funny indeed. I must also say, on the Labour side, the government side, the big breaking news is that Rachel Reeves has apparently changed her hair and adopted red. So there you go. She's chosen the right colour, I say. Anyway, so that's just dropped.
You've inspired her, Emily.
I've inspired her, of course. Thank you very much indeed, Tom Harwood. You're in Birmingham for the conference that is now pretty much wrapped up. Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. We are, of course, going to bring you the very latest from Israel, as Israel warns Iran that it will fight back.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
This week, Free Speech Brighton, a sister group of the Free Speech Union, claimed that they were kicked out of a pub in the city for discussing trans issues in schools. The group booked a room in a pub for an evening of speeches and discussion when they claimed security guards came and asked them to leave after one speaker began to talk about this topic. Now, a clip of the evening was, in fact, posted to social media. Can you give us some background to what happened, what the event was for, and why you booked it?
Our normal pub was being refurbished, so about 3 weeks ago I went in and booked a local pub for a meeting, and they didn't ask any questions about what sort of meeting. It was in a back room. It was mainly secluded from the rest of the pub, so I thought it would be fine. But anyway, they didn't ask any questions. They took my booking. We arrived, I set up. The first speaker started speaking, who's a retired teacher who was concerned about trans in schools and how that affects children. But she was talking purely about children. She was not talking about adults who have protected characteristics, obviously. And then towards the end of her speech, I became aware of security guards standing behind me in the middle room. So I went to have a quick word with them and see what they wanted. And they said, we've had a complaint. And I said, what's the complaint? And they wouldn't say. Then they said, will you come and talk to the landlord? So I went to the front of the bar and they indicated this chap was the landlord, but he looked about 20, so I don't think he was the landlord. So I said, I hear you have a complaint about us. Can you tell me what it is? And he couldn't.
That sounds very Kafkaesque, as though you've committed a crime, but they can't tell you what the crime is.
Well, that's what I couldn't understand, because, you know, you might... Obviously, they can't tell you who the complainant is, but they should be able to tell you what the complaint is.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
OK, well, it's now 2:24. You're watching and listening to Good Afternoon Britain. Now, in the last few moments, police in Denmark have confirmed that an explosion outside the Israeli embassy in Copenhagen was caused by hand grenades. Now, this comes as fears are mounting that the Middle East is on the cusp of an all-out war after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu swore Iran will pay for the large-scale missile attack it launched on Israel yesterday evening. In the studio, we have Mark White, our Home and Security Editor, to bring us the latest. What is the latest from Copenhagen, then?
Well, an investigation was launched after these twin explosions that took place outside the main Israeli embassy building in Copenhagen on examining the fragments from that explosion. Now, the police in the city of Copenhagen are confirming that the objects that were thrown at the embassy apparently were hand grenades. 2 hand grenades, it seems. Now, this follows explosions or loud bangs that were heard at the Israeli embassy in Stockholm, Sweden, last night as well. This was all happening around about the same time as the ballistic missile strikes on Israel. And that particular incident, the bangs in Stockholm, according to Swedish police, were caused by gunfire aimed towards the Israeli embassy there as well. So this just heightens the concern that police and security agencies across Europe will be worried about really now in the aftermath of what happened last night, and of course what Israel's response to the ballistic missile attacks will be. We're already hearing from the Israeli ambassador to the UK that there will be a severe response from Israel to these ballistic missile strikes.
Yes, and these incidents in Denmark and Sweden certainly highlight how things can escalate here when they do so in the Middle East. We can see the repercussions in the West, of course, as well. We know that it is Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, a holy day, a day of celebrations to the Jewish community in the West, and particularly in this country as well, ramping up security, I understand. Yes, indeed. And on that point about the new year, we heard from the Israeli ambassador to the UK, Sipi Hotovely, who said that she believes that the ballistic missiles that came over from Iran were targeting Israeli civilians as they prepared for this Jewish holiday. She has, not her, but the Israeli military has also confirmed the first casualties. So the Israeli population mourning the death of an Israeli soldier, Captain Eitan Oster, who was part of a commando force. I think we have a picture of that commander who was part of this commando force that was moving into southern Lebanon as part of the operation to push through some of these villages that are described as Hezbollah strongholds. And you can see the image of him there. He was killed along with a number of other Israeli soldiers injured in fierce fighting, we're told, between the IDF and Hezbollah terrorists up there in these border villages. Now, Israel has promised, it's warning Iran that it will retaliate strongly. There will be a strong response. What might that look like? Well, I think it will be of a magnitude
greater than the response that we saw in April. You'll remember that there was a missile and drone strike from Iran on Israel then, and that was seen, of course, as unprecedented. That had never happened before. So there was a great deal of concern about the potential for the Israeli response there. But pretty much all of those, 99% of those missiles were shot down. And President Joe Biden urged Benjamin Netanyahu to take the win, to not respond. Well, in the end, they responded, but it was pretty limited around a number of sites in Iran. And that was viewed, I think, by the Iranian regime at the time as not being of a significant enough magnitude that they would then feel obliged to launch another attack in response to that. This time round, it could well be different. I think this time round, all the mood music coming out of Israel from both governmental and military circles seems to suggest that it will be a more significant strike on Iran.
OK, well, thank you very much indeed, Mark White, our Home and Security editor. Well, let's get some more reaction from security expert and former police officer Chris Phillips. Chris, we're being told that perhaps the terror threat will be on the increase. We've seen explosions in both Sweden and Copenhagen since this latest escalation in the Middle East.
Yeah, good afternoon. It is very naive to think that we won't have repercussions across not only the West, but actually across the world. I think Jewish communities right across the world will be a bit concerned about what's going on and will be putting themselves at a higher state of alert. I think from our perspective, we don't know actually how many sleeper cells there are in the UK or across Europe. And of course, Iran may decide to make use of people that they've sent over here to carry out attacks.
Well, this is the problem, isn't it? Iran's influence is very much global and very much in the West as well. Have we taken this threat seriously enough over the years?
Well, we've known about it, but have we taken it seriously? Clearly not, because we've allowed lots and lots of people to come over unchecked. And of course, Iran operate worldwide, and they operate in a way that they know that they can bring people over, not necessarily even to commit offences themselves here, but actually to encourage others. So we don't know what's going to go on. I think it is a time that we all need to be very alert to, particularly in the Jewish community, but actually right across the West, right across the world.
Yes, and of course, as we come up to the one-year anniversary of the Hamas attack in Israel, things will be heightened, won't they? The security services presumably will be working overtime to prevent any potential terror attack in line with that anniversary.
Yeah, the intelligence systems operate really well. But of course, if the Iranians are, as we believe, actually have infiltrated into our country and into other countries, then they will also have be operating in a way that will be difficult to catch. I think, fingers crossed, this war actually blows over to some extent, because there is big problems right across the world with the potential terror threat that these people pose.
Well, absolutely. Thank you very much indeed, Chris Phillips. Great to get your insight on this, security expert and, of course, a former police officer too. Thank you very much indeed. Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. There is yet another blunder when it comes to the government's early release scheme in our prisons. I'll reveal what exactly after the break, after the news headline.
Emily, thank you. The top stories. All four Tory leadership candidates have given their speeches on the final day of the party conference in Birmingham. Shadow Security Minister Tom Tugendhat saying the Tories have led the fight for freedom. The Conservative candidate said he's had enough of the lack of principle and clarity. Mr Tugendhat said the general election was bruising and that the Tories need to restore trust as he set out his pitch to be the party's next leader.
Leadership is not about empty promises. It's not about cheap rhetoric or government by management consultancy. It's not about managing decline, and it's not about talking our country down. Leadership is about making choices that serve our country and our people best, I promise you that as your leader, I will serve our country. I will lead with conviction. I will act decisively. My mission is the prosperity and happiness of the British people. Together, we can win.
Kemi Badenoch has vowed to make the Chancellor wriggle and the Prime Minister sweat. She rounded up the speeches today, adding young Conservatives have been let down by the party.
A new political force has risen. Something I have been fighting all my political career: identity politics. Like the 1970s, we face a battle of ideas against the left and its desire for ever greater social and economic control. It is socialism returned, socialism in a suit.
In other news, Sir Keir Starmer says he wants to put the UK-EU relationship back on a stable, positive footing as he met European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen in Brussels. Von der Leyen said the close alignment on international matters was a good foundation for talks on the UK-EU relationship. The Prime Minister is in Brussels to meet European Union chiefs with a promise to put the Brexit years behind us and form a closer relationship with the bloc. He aims to push for a better trading relationship and greater cooperation on defence and security measures. It's his first visit to Brussels as Prime Minister.
I firmly believe that the British public wants a return to pragmatic, sensible leadership when it comes to dealing with our closest neighbours, to make Brexit work and to deliver in their interests, to find ways to boost economic growth, strengthen our security and tackle shared challenges like irregular migration and climate change.
And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, good morning and welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Well, across the south there is plenty of cloud today with some showers possible at times, but in the north we do have plenty of fine and dry weather. And the reason for this is that high pressure is generally dominating the weather in the north, but we still have an area of low pressure down to the southeast, which is bringing us that cloud and those showers, perhaps some longer spells of rain and drizzle at times too. But across Northern Ireland, Scotland, northern parts of England, plenty of fine and dry weather, perhaps just a bit more cloud at times in the afternoon, but still plenty of bright and sunny spells in between. Temperatures generally are around about average, but it is going to be feeling colder under that cloud. But in those sheltered spots, particularly western parts of Scotland, it should feel rather pleasant where you catch the sunshine. Now, heading into the evening, that cloud is going to stick around across southern parts for a time, still with some spots of rain and drizzle and some showers moving into eastern coasts, not really dying away until the overnight period. But across Northern Ireland, Scotland, once again, northern parts of England, plenty of late evening sunshine before it goes down. However, as the sun does start to go down, it is going to be feeling quite cold overnight, likely to see some frost, particularly in northern parts of the country, and in rural spots as well, likely to see some mist and fog overnight too, which might just be a little bit slow to clear by the time we reach the morning. That cloud across the south will eventually ease away in those showers too, but you might still just catch the odd one or two, particularly across parts of East Anglia. But as I say, generally a cold night overall, particularly in the north, where we're likely to see that frost by the time you wake up in the morning. Now, generally though, Thursday is the better day. We've got high pressure building, which means lots of fine and dry weather across the country. Still a slight breeze around coastal areas, which might just add on to the wind chill there, and still just the possibility of the odd shower across East Anglia. But otherwise, another fine, dry day for many, just perhaps a bit more cloud in the west later.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon to you, I'm Jules Buckley. Let's go to Scotland. Southbound M90, the exit set to come off at Holbeatha Junction 3 for the A92. Well, there's a breakdown there, so it's partially blocked and starting to look quite slow. Now, the M65 both ways between Burnley and Accrington, Junction 10 to 8, still looking slow from an earlier collision. It was closed, it's now reopened though. Eastbound M54, Shifnal Junction 4 to Albrighton at 3. Queues obstruction there means a lane shut, it's slow going. And in Berkshire, the west westbound M4 heavy, a field to Newbury, that's junction 12 to 13, 2 lanes coned off. There's debris on the road there following an earlier collision. And in the roadworks on the northbound M3, just before the M25 junction 2, the 2 lanes are coned off, a multi-vehicle bumper being recovered, queuing prior to 3 at Lightwater and Bagshot.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
This Sunday, join me, Camilla Tominey, for an exclusive interview with one of the most controversial, influential and unique political figures of our time. Boris Johnson will be in studio discussing his new memoir, Unleashed, the gripping story of how he dealt with plotting politicians, problematic princes and a pandemic. From Boris bikes to Brexit and everything else in between. This Sunday at 9:30 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Oh, you won't want to miss that interview with Camilla Tominey and Boris Johnson. Certainly this Sunday, 9:30 a.m. Anyway, we're going to turn our attention to the government's early release scheme, because it turns out that almost 60 criminals freed from Scottish jails over the summer as part of this scheme have already reoffended and are back behind bars. Yes, a total of 477 inmates were released early after the Scottish Government enacted emergency laws to ease pressure on the country's dangerously full prisons. But it's now emerged that 57 of these prisoners have been sent back to jail after committing further crimes. OK, well, to discuss this further, I'm joined by retired prison governor and author Vanessa Frake. Vanessa, we know that many people, when they come out of prison, do go on to reoffend, but this seems an alarmingly high number of people who were given their freedom under the early release scheme to then be behind bars so soon.
Yeah, good afternoon. I mean, we were all waiting for this to happen, weren't we? We haven't got the figures released in England and Wales yet, but I would imagine that they'll be similar. We're looking at 1 in 10, 1 in 12, committing further offences or not adhering to their licence conditions. And, if you're going to have an early release scheme, then the most important thing is that you've got to manage it properly. And clearly there are serious failings here. In particular, housing, homelessness is known to be a link to repeat reoffending, and we just haven't got it right. And, it is a worrying time. It's a worrying time for victims, and it's a worrying time for prisons. But, reoffending is not our forte, really. We as a country, we lock up more prisoners than Western Europe, and we have the worst reoffending rates in Western Europe. So clearly many of these prisoners that were released were not ready to be released, and that is a serious issue, I think.
Well, yeah, that's pretty clear considering the number who are now back in prison. I was reading that there have been cases where prisoners who've been released early have committed crimes or gone to the police in order to then be put back in prison simply because they don't have anywhere to live or their life prospects are so hopeless, now that they're back in freedom, I guess, that they want to go back to prison. Is that really the case?
Well, yeah, I think I've seen myself prisoners returning because they've got nowhere to go, nothing to do, no support systems on the outside. They return to drugs or alcohol, and in prison they get a bed, they get 3 meals a day, and they're looked after. And it's not that prisons are cushy, I hasten to add. It's that the system has failed them, because one of the most important things, apart from keeping those in custody and keeping the public safe, is to address offending behaviour, to help these people turn their lives around and lead better lives and be part of society. And we just can't seem to get that right.
Also, Vanessa, I'm just thinking now, the cost of this as well to the taxpayer, imprisoning people. They go through the criminal justice system, they get sentenced, they get put in jail, then released early through a scheme, wrongly released early, go on to commit another crime, straight back through the criminal justice system, straight back into prison, and the cycle continues. Hugely draining.
Yeah, it's very draining on resources. It's draining on, people's tax. When you think a prisoner costs around £50,000 per prisoner placed per year, absolutely, it is a drain on our financial cycle. And once prisoners get on that, crime roundabout, it is very difficult to get them off it. And I think, when we look at the probation service, again, another overstretched service that has been, poorly funded over the years. There's something like 2,000 probation officers, for sure. I was chatting to one the other day, and she said, her workload literally trebled on the release of prisoners in her area. And, that's an awful lot to put on somebody who is already struggling to cope with their workload. And I think, unless you manage these people properly, you are going to get them reoffending.
I must say, working in a prison, it's got to be one of the most stressful jobs you can have, working with people who are extremely difficult, possibly violent, possibly addicted to drugs, all sorts going on. It's a difficult job. Do we value people who work in our prisons enough?
No, I don't think we do, and I don't think we have. Once prisoners are behind that 12-foot wall, they're forgotten about by society. As long as society is happy that they're locked up and keeping the public safe, that's all society is bothered about. Look, we need to look and have the political will to change what's going on in our prisons, because otherwise, every week I'll be on here about reoffending rates and prisons overcrowded and shortages of staff and, corrupt staff and incidents in prison and escapes, etc., etc. Because, there are definitely people that should be locked up to protect society, but there are an awful lot of those that shouldn't be locked up, that better community services would be more apt for them than languishing in cells and then being released, to no home, no support systems, and going back to addictions.
Yeah, and perhaps in some cases we're simply locking up the wrong people. The wrong people are being let out early and the wrong people are being put in prison, perhaps, in some cases. Vanessa Frake, thank you very much for continuing to come on to talk about these sometimes rather depressing stories, but very important to highlight nonetheless. Thank you very much, retired prison governor and author Vanessa Frake. Well, just before we move on, as the four remaining candidates for the Tory leadership finished their speeches, GB News presenter Andrew Pearce got the thoughts of the former Chancellor George Osborne, remember him, on who made the best pitch for the top job.
I think there was a clear winner, actually, and by the way, I'm not signed up to any of these candidates. I thought James Cleverly did the best speech and had the best audience reaction. And that's interesting because I think anyone observing the contest would say he probably came into the conference maybe in third or fourth place. Whether that translates into votes from MPs, which is the critical next stage, who knows? But I think he delivered the goods. And I also thought the format worked. I guess I was a bit... There's a question I had on the train coming here this morning, which is the device of giving everyone a chance to give a speech going to work in the same way it did 20 years ago with the conference in which Cameron got elected or got himself in a position where he was the front runner? And the answer is I think it did work. And the strengths and weaknesses of all the candidates was on display.
Very interesting there to get the perspective of George Osborne, the former Chancellor there at the Conservative Party conference, still very much involved, very interested. So we can see in what's taking place. James Cleverly is the one for him. We're hearing more and more about James Cleverly, aren't we? It does seem as though people in the room liked what he was saying, whether the public need to like what he's saying as well if he's going to do well and win that leadership, as well as go on to become Prime Minister, is his hope, of course. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. We are going to very quickly turn our attention to Prince Harry. He's been in South Africa, I believe, saying all sorts. I'll reveal after this break.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Right, up and down the country, many parents are preparing or have indeed already sent their child off to university.
Indeed, but sometimes it can leave parents struggling to cope with the, quote, empty nest syndrome their child leaves behind. So joining us now to discuss how to cope with sending off your sprogs to university, or not so sprogs, is broadcaster and psychotherapist Lucy Beresford. Good morning, Lucy. Nice to see you this early. This is a real thing, isn't it? It's our colleague Paul Coitz, our sports expert, describes it as grief, sending your young adults off to uni and leaving the nest for the first time.
Yes, I think grief is the right word because it's an ending, and it's not just an ending with your relationship with your child. It changes from here on in, but it also is very much about your identity. Your identity as a parent is weakening. You'll always be that child's parent, but you're not going to have the same involvement on a daily basis. And so you're left to think, OK, well, what does my life look like going forward? What's my relationship? If you're in a relationship with a partner, how is that going to change? And like all elements of grief, there's going to be a bit of a process. There's going to be that transition period where you adjust to your new life, just as your sprogs, as you call them, are adjusting to their new, exciting phase of their life.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking... This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
OK, well, to end the show, we're going to see what Prince Harry has been up to. He's embarked on another solo trip, this time to South Africa, continuing his charity work following a brief visit to the UK for the Well Child Awards. I don't believe he met with his father or indeed his brother, but the Duke of Sussex in South Africa met with Prince Seeiso of Lesotho to discuss the charity's progress, focusing on supporting young people affected by HIV. OK, well, joining me now is royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams. Richard, Prince Harry showing his charitable side.
No, absolutely. He's always had an affinity, a very special affinity with Africa. And indeed, in 2004, during his gap year, he spent a while in Lesotho, a landlocked African kingdom, and 2 years later, he and Prince Seeiso, who you mentioned, in honour of their mothers, founded the charity centre Male. It means in Sotho, forget-me-not, which was Diana's favourite flower. And this is a trip again, he's solo, and it's been very, very interesting in the last period because, of course, as you know, in New York, he for several days was involved in charitable activities, all of them solo. Then he was in London for the Well Child Awards. He's been involved with that for 15 years. It was rather like old times to see the way he acted, so to speak, so naturally with the children, with the families, and so forth.
So, I mean, I'm reading here that he said the people from the top need to start listening. Who's he referring to there? Is he referring to governments?
Well, clearly he wants more support for Sendimali. I mean, the idea is to expand it somewhat to help the young who are needy, but most specifically the HIV/AIDS situation has been so terrible in Lesotho. So clearly he's very well placed. No one else has his royal status, and it's because of this he's so well placed to make a push for a very worthy cause.
Richard, he's doing quite a bit on his own, isn't he, at the moment?
As we are all noticing with great interest. You're absolutely right. And I think all these events have gone off tremendously well. They've been uncontroversial. He hasn't given any interviews which have caused offence, and there's absolutely no doubt about it. Perhaps something is being planned that we are unaware of. His next docuseries for Netflix on Poe apparently doesn't feature him much. So what we're waiting to see is how this will be developing in the weeks and months. Will there be some more tours? They've been, of course, to Nigeria, and he and Meghan most recently to Latin America. So is this part and parcel of a new strategy, whereas Meghan develops her cooking side, say, on Netflix, and perhaps Harry does more so?
Well, thank you very much indeed, Richard Fitzwilliams. As ever, lovely to speak to you and get your insight. Thank you very much indeed. Well, thank you for watching Good Afternoon Britain. I think it's safe to say that Starmer's trip to Brussels is the subject that really got you going today. Lots of concerns that potentially Starmer is trying to take us back in. Although, to be fair, he does say that absolutely not. We will not be returning to the single market nor the customs union. But it does look as though Brussels will demand some concessions if he's going to get some new and improved, flashy new deal with the European Union. Anyway, don't go anywhere. It is Martin Dobney up next.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Well, we've got a cold night ahead with some frost and fog in places, but as we head into tomorrow, plenty of fine and settled weather for many. The south will have to wait though for that as we head into this afternoon. Still plenty of cloud here as low pressure dominates, but as high pressure builds from the north, that's bringing us that fine and settled weather. As I say though, as we head into this evening, there will still be some cloud across the south and southeast and still a few showers feeding into some east and southeastern coasts, but these will generally ease away as we head overnight. And this leaves plenty of clear skies overnight as well. So it is going to be turning cold and we're likely to see some fog, particularly in northern rural spots, and likely to see some frost by the time we wake up tomorrow as well. So to start tomorrow, as I say, most of that cloud generally breaking through the course of the night, but still some showers just feeding in to the southeast coast still by the time we reach tomorrow morning. But elsewhere, plenty of clear skies, so plenty of fog patches in places, and it will be feeling chilly with some frost in places too. But generally, largely dry, just away from those showers just feeding into the southeast coast. Tomorrow as well, we've got high pressure building, and that means generally a better day for all, largely dry and settled with plenty of sunny spells around. As I say, still the odd shower just moving into the southeast coast, but you'll probably be unlucky if you catch any of those. Generally dry, just perhaps a build of higher cloud just moving into western parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland later on into the afternoon. But with much lighter winds, generally feeling more pleasant where you do catch the sunshine. As we head into the evening as well, that cloud will continue to build in the west, perhaps some light rain here at times, but overall generally another dry night, plenty of clear spells, so more mist and fog to come and feeling cold once again too. And we are expecting a bit more of unsettled weather as we head into the weekend, so make sure you stay tuned for all the details. Bye for now.